Is she good now? All right. I'd like to start as we have in the past with a moment of silence for those Tennessee families that are still struggling and suffering because of the opioid crisis in our state. Thank you. Thanks for everybody who came a long way. Lisa, I know it's a long way. Just so you know, I've got to do the same thing going back, so I'll be behind you somewhere going up the road. The commissioner's going to be a little bit late, so she's already texted us and asked us to get started if we can, and I'd like to do that because we've got a pretty aggressive agenda and a lot to get through. So I want to go ahead and recognize our council members who are present on Zoom if we can, and I can't see all of them. You don't have to worry about speaking up, guys. I'll speak up for you, but I do see Dr. Timothy Fournette from Cookeville, Tennessee, at the top of our screen, and then General Sharm Allen from Knox County, and then Wayne Wyckoff. And I think Wayne is either Knoxville or Maryville. I can't remember, Wayne. I get the two. A county that touches each other in East Tennessee for sure. And then we've got some at the bottom I don't recognize.
Yeah, so we have Armando virtual. Armando, are you on? We have, let's see here, is Sharm, are you on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Kim Moore, are you on? Stephanie Vanterpool? Timothy Fournette, I see you. And Wayne Wyckoff. Okay, so we see Wayne, Sharm, and Tim.
All right. And then if we could, we'll start to my left with Karen, if you'll just introduce yourself and where you're from, just briefly, and we'll make sure we've got a physical quorum.
Right. Karen Pershing, Metro Direct Coalition, Knoxville.
Tommy Farmer, Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
Hi, I'm Brian Buck with Ridgeview.
Clay Jackson, Paladin Medicine, Memphis.
Shane Sexton, retired criminal court judge.
Lisa Tipton, Executive Director of Families Free.
Mike Flynn, retired DA from Blount County.
Go ahead. I thought it was just council members, I'm sorry. Taryn Foss, with the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, Division of Substance Abuse Services.
Kurt Hippel with the Department, Division of Planning, Policy, and Legislation.
Elizabeth Rickman-Vaden, Opioid Abatement Council. Ella Redding, the Opioid Abatement Council.
Jessica Youngbloom, forgot my name for a minute, Director of Strategic Initiatives with the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
Wes Gibbons, Chief Pharmacist, State Opioid Treatment Authority at the Department, Division of Clinical Leadership.
Sam Buckley, Assistant Deputy Counsel, Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
Zach Griffith, General Counsel.
Mary Shelton, Executive Director for the Opioid Abatement Council.
I'm Stephen Lloyd, internal medicine, addiction medicine doctor in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. So, again, thank you all for coming. We got put off by about 4 weeks. That was completely my fault. We've had a meeting in the interim to discuss some things that couldn't wait until today, but I'm certainly glad that everybody made it here safely and hopefully we'll make it home safely. We'll just start off with the first part of this. It may be a surprise to a few people on here, but about ethics discussion, and I'll just briefly tell you what generated this. As you all know, I think I know everybody here. I'm a business owner. I have practices throughout the state of Tennessee in which we do outpatient medication-assisted treatment. We also work in the criminal justice system in Jefferson County with a jail program with Dwayne Sloan. We have a PIC center in Wilson County, which is preventing incarceration in our communities. It's a part of a diversion program with the sheriff and DA in Wilson County, which is where I live. And so I have private interest. And I got, whenever we do what we're doing right now, it looks like that when all's said and done, we'll have north of $1 billion that the council is responsible to use as abatement for our state. And so we want to make really sure that we are, number one, transparent, and number two, not conflicted in any ways. And so with that said, the commissioner, myself, Mary, met with the attorneys from the governor's office, actually an attorney for the governor's office, as well as Zach. to talk about this, and we want to make sure everybody's on the same page before we get into the actual allocation of funds through our grant process. And guys, this started with me. I didn't start with anybody else. I need to make sure that I don't benefit financially in any way from any decisions this council makes. I'm the chair, although I'm not going to vote, as we initially stated. I still do not want to have either the appearance of or benefit from financially in any way from decisions this council makes during my time as chair. So it actually started with me. That's what generated this. And with that said, Commissioner was going to say a few words. She's not here.
She's on her way in.
Okay.
Let's
Okay.
dance for just a minute and
Can
she'll
I,
walk
you need
in.
fill time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like song and dance?
I can do that. I can fill time. No, we'll wait on, Commissioner. We knew she was going to be just a little bit late.
In the meantime, let me find out if anybody has joined virtually. Armando, have you joined virtually? Ken Moore, have you joined virtually? Stephanie Vanterpool?
Yes, I'm here.
Did I hear Stephanie?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
I thought she
Thank
did.
you so much. Wonderful.
There she is.
Awesome. Thank you.
Not to put you under the gun, but you're up.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad to be up. I'm glad to be up. Y'all, I'm triple booked today, doing things with the governor's ledge staff because we have a special session coming up, as you know, doing some other things. So, Dr. Lloyd, can you tell me what you've done so far?
I gave the intro to the ethics discussion.
Yes, sir.
And left it for you.
Awesome. Okay. In your intro, can you tell me what you covered, sir?
Just about the spur of it and the fact that I am a business owner within the state of Tennessee in this field and the importance of staying transparent and non-conflicted in even the appearance of conflict.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
All right. So a couple things that I want to say. After y'all's last meeting, there was some statements made about whether or not how we were leading this was truly above ethics and making sure that there were no conflicts. To that end, took that seriously. Dr. Lloyd took that seriously. We talked to the governor's general counsel and spoke about, is there anything more that we should do as a body, as a council, to make sure that people that might have a concern about Dr. Lloyd or anyone else that's on this council that will be looking at proposals, that there would be no conflict. So to that end, she gave us a lot of great feedback. Her name's Erin Merrick. She met with our general counsel, Zach Griffin, Mary Shelton, Dr. Lloyd, and myself. And so Zach will be going over what we feel now we need to make sure that we adhere to. As you all know, we're dealing with millions and millions, multi-millions of dollars. And the last thing we want or need, as Dr. Lloyd agrees, is some sort of tie up on a conflict or ethic. So very excited about this conversation, very excited about your ability to sign off on what we put together, and I will turn it over to Zach.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Hello, everybody. I introduced myself earlier as the general counsel, and I'm going to go through some forms, so just to let you know, they're in the packets. So you've got them, the blue packets. And then also, I believe she's going to email them to others. Then I'm going to go through these. I'm going to hit the highlights, but I do ask that everyone please find the time to read them in full.
In your blue packet, look underneath your notebook, and there's a little blue paper folder. Then on the left-hand side are the copies to sign, and the right-hand side are documents that Zach will go over. Okay?
Yeah, then like I said, I'm going to go over the highlights on them, and she can collect the signatures from you later. But important note, you've got them. Please do take a full read of them when you get a chance. Also, she'll be getting them out by email. And then you'll see in the slideshow, there's a web address for Executive Order 2. And with that, I'm going to get into them. The first one I'm going to go over is the one that's labeled, or titled Legal Guidance, Opioid Abatement Council Legal Guidance. And again, the highlights here, I'll just give you a moment to get to that document.
So it's sitting right behind the executive order number 2 in the blue folder.
Thank you. While y'all are getting to that, I'll say too, if you have specific questions later or want to talk to me at any time, feel free to contact me about that, or about these matters. Okay, at the top, it's just pointing out that we are your legal staff. The department is the staff for the Opioid Abatement Council, so that means we can also provide legal services to the Opioid Abatement Council. The next one, is titled Ethics Guidelines. The key takeaway from this one is, as has already been mentioned and reinforced by the Commissioner, we're looking to the highest standards of state ethics and transparency. Executive Order number 2, which we'll go over in a moment, is being adopted to guide our ethics. In other words, when we've got questions, when we're looking for our standards, that's what we will look to. That's an executive order that the governor put out, well, it's the second executive order, which establishes ethics standards for state government. And so that's what we will look to as our guide and incorporate as our standards. The important in that are 2 concepts that'll get stressed repeatedly, frankly, in the stuff you look at. But it's that you're trying to avoid even the appearance of any kind of conflict or even the appearance of any kind of ethical question, and also the notion of disclosing, that if there is something that may or anybody could reasonably think could create an appearance, that there's a process by which you can disclose it, and then that can be handled. It can be figured out how to resolve or deal with that. The next section you see is titled Open Meetings. Bottom line on that is, these are open meetings, and that's a technical term. It means that they're open to the public. They have to be conducted open to the public. The statute that created this council specifically says these meetings shall be open meetings. An important takeaway from that is that means when it comes to the business of this council, it needs to be conducted in these meetings. So don't conduct the business of the council outside of an official meeting of the council. So don't be discussing it, deliberating it, doing anything that could be construed as the business of the council that should be happening in one of the actual meetings. Next thing you see down there is the Open Records Act. That also applies to us. So that means all the records, everything we have will be open to the public. That would include these ethics forms and things that you fill out and sign. All of that's open records. And everything else we do in these meetings is open. I note privacy, and with the various backgrounds you have, I think you're all going to be very well informed on this sort of stuff, but my comment there is just to bring attention to the idea that should for some reason there be information that would be protected by HIPAA, 42 CFR, any of the various privacy laws that protect basically personal health information, we need to make sure to handle that accordingly. My general advice there would be, let's just not bring that in unless it's absolutely necessary. That way we don't have to figure out how to comply with it. And then the final note down there, which I labeled removal, which I could have labeled final decisions in hindsight, but the point with that one is that if there are questions, ultimately the final decider would be whomever it was that appointed you. You know, different people have different appointing authorities, but ultimately that's who we would go to if there was a question where we needed a final decision. And then, unless there's any questions for the group, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next item. Yes, sir.
Mr. Griffith, you mentioned not conducting business with the council outside of open meetings. We have subcommittees which meet and discuss. You did mention the word discuss. We don't have any votes outside of open meetings. We have subcommittees that do quite a bit of work in between our meetings. I mean, we meet 12 hours a year. We're responsible for dispersing $1 billion over 18 years, so we can't do that in 12 hours a year. I'm assuming that we can talk and discuss among ourselves things, you know, motions and directives from our chair, from our executive director between meetings. But you did mention the word discuss. I just want to be very clear that a subcommittee can have a Zoom call, for instance, and discuss standards and then report back to the full committee at the next meeting.
Sir, as long, and I want to say something, Zach, we didn't cover this, as long as it's just the members that are on this council.
Yes.
No
Okay.
other members, no community, no county, no, just whoever's on this council.
So if our chair directs a subcommittee of 4 people, it's those 4 and no more?
Yes, sir.
Or the executive director would be allowed, or?
Yes, sir.
All right.
That's right, and the two takeaways on that, the first one would be, particularly until we kind of get into a rhythm of things, I'd recommend that we all put together subcommittees, and it's funny, Sam and I had this very conversation a couple of days ago where we talked about this, and the idea would be, bring to us and let us know what you plan on doing with that subcommittee so we can take a look at it and try to make sure we're staying on the right side of that line. But the little bit bigger answer to your question is, notionally, the subcommittees are not making final decisions, they're not doing full deliberations. It's more of a technical thing. They're gathering information to bring to this open meeting.
Yes.
So then in open meeting, it can be reviewed, deliberated on, and decisions made. So that's kind of where that line falls. But my ask would be to just let us know what subcommittees are being formed or what you intend to cover so we can just sort of make sure.
And Zach, since you've not been a part of this, but Sam has, all of that's discussed in here. So Sam will hear it, and if he thinks there's a concern, he'll tell us. But for the regular work of what's been happening here, they're falling under what needs to be done.
That was my understanding. When I heard the word discuss, my ears perked up.
Does that address your question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Anything else before I move on? Okay, next I draw your attention to Executive Order number 2. I don't mean to take your job away, Sean. It's the one that has the big yellow seal on the top. That'll make it easy to see. Now, I mentioned that we're going to accept Executive Order 2 as our guidance. I want to walk through this with you a little bit. This is the one, by the way, look, the slide that's being displayed on the screen now, that shows the web address where you can get it, and frankly, you can Google Executive Order number 2, Tennessee, and you'll go right to it. But anyway, this one, if you go down, bottom of the first page, you really hit sort of heart of it, the core, which is you need to avoid even the appearance of, and then it lists a few things. And again, the keywords I would stress here is avoid appearance of. That's the standard. And it's using public office or your position on this council for private gain, giving preferential treatment of any sort, doing anything that would appear to interfere with the efficiency or the economy of government, or in our case, with the administration of the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund and the business of this council. Anything that would call into question complete independence and impartiality. Anything that would look like decisions being made outside of official channels, which is to some degree what we just discussed. And then anything that would harm the confidence of the public in the activities of this council. The next section then gets into, and this actually covers financial interest. There's going to be a form I'll go over with you here in a moment. They'll deal with this more. But the short of this is, in regard to the Opioid Abatement Council and the trust fund, you need to not have any direct or indirect financial interest or other benefits that might come from it, or you need to disclose them so that we can deal with it. The next part of that talks about use of information. The idea here is that, and this goes, well, the idea here is basically not to disclose information that's not otherwise available to the public so that people don't get some sort of inside benefit is what this is really about. So in terms of like sharing information with others, don't give them an unfair inside benefit. And in terms of how you use the information you have, don't give yourself an unfair inside benefit. Like, don't use the information that's on your own head to then go do something that you've got an unfair advantage on yourself. And then the next part talks about government property. And keep in mind, this executive order was written for the executive branch. It wasn't written tailored to this group, okay? So we have to read it in a way that tailors it to this group. But the government property part is basically just don't use government property for non-government purposes. Next section on page 3 talks about gifts. The short here is avoid them. Just don't accept gifts from people who might have interest in the business of the council, because that creates an appearance. Bottom line, it's just best to avoid it, okay? There are some exceptions listed down there below, because sometimes that sort of thing would happen. I'd like to think with the narrow focus of this council, though, that ideally you just wouldn't be receiving any gifts from anybody who could have some sort of interest or could receive some sort of benefit from the council. I will note, too, a lot of the language talks about receiving benefit, like you're going to get something positive. There's the other side as well. Like, you shouldn't receive gifts or do things that make you look like you might have a conflict from a side that's opposing something, even if they're trying to stop money from flowing. Either way, just don't go there. Just avoid it. But if you have any specific questions, again, you can come to me later. Next, page 5 talks about disclosures. Again, this executive order, we're going to tailor it to us for our application. That gets into forms. We've got our own forms we've developed. I'll go over one of those with you in a moment. And then The rest of it gets into some sort of administrative stuff, but I do want to draw your attention to number 8 on page 5, which basically says, when you're in doubt what to do. Bottom line here is, when you're in doubt, come to me, let's sort it out, let's get ahead of it, let's stay in front of it, so that there's no problem, and if there is a conflict, we'll sort it out. And then ultimately, I'd note that, again, the final decider, if you will, would be your appointing authority, should we need to have something answered in that regard. And then the next page is signature, and then that attachment at the end of it doesn't really apply to the council, that's something else. But does anybody have any questions about that before I move on?
I do. Some of us here run nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
When you run nonprofits, you're soliciting donations, you're having special events where you have sponsors, and people buying tickets, that kind of thing. How does that apply to this? Because based on what this is saying, I'm not supposed to take anything, right? As long as I'm serving on the council.
Well, and I know everybody hates the lawyer answer, it depends, but a lot of that will depend on the it just is what it is. It'll depend on the facts and how close your involvement is and what's going on. I would just suggest, if you have concern about that you come to me separately, and we'll try to sort through those. But that's one that will be very fact-specific. Anybody got anything else? Okay.
Karen, I want to answer a little bit more what you said, because we had talked a lot about this, because some of you run nonprofits that might apply, right? The main thing here is that if there's any financial gain to you yourself, like there's some huge raise or bonus that comes to you because you got funding, that's a really huge appearance conflict. And I think everybody would get that, because you don't want that on the front page of the paper. We were talking about Justice Alito. He's a Supreme Court justice and accepted this huge gift to go on a plane and go salmon fishing, right? And that's on the front page everywhere. So to Zach's point, think about it, like if it's on the front page of the paper, does it pass the smell test? And if you're concerned it doesn't, and this is where, Dr. Lloyd's gone above and beyond. His board is saying they won't even benefit, because he's chair. Talk to Zach. He's who you need to talk to about that. But obviously, you know that you're running nonprofits that do this work. But if you've got a question, talk to Zach. Lisa, you run one. Are you or Brian, any extra questions you've got, or anybody else that's on here?
No, that's really helpful. Obviously, Ridgeview, not unlike Dr. Lloyd's, mission is to serve a lot of the folks that we're talking about. So there will be people that will benefit, whether they're in a Ridgeview program or not. And I was, in the spirit of full disclosure, I, in my role, serve on a lot of boards and councils, the Region 2 Planning and Policy Council,
yeah.
The TAMHO board, the NAMI. So there are a lot of other entities that we work closely with. Mm-hmm. So on a case-by-case basis, I would think that we would, if there was any appearance of conflict of interest, I would certainly share that with the council, and
Absolutely.
We could talk through it.
Absolutely. Lisa, anything?
Well, just in thinking, I think this is very clear and well thought out as far as the duties of this board, but I think I would ask the question of the different funds that have gone to the counties and how that plays into this, because I am the appointment of the county mayors.
Right.
That's my appointing board, but there are a lot of people asking about those funds, how can it be spent? So, and we have been the recipient of similar funds in the past for a residential recovery court program we're doing.
Right.
That's governed by a whole separate board and legal team. But I feel like, for that, my only question would be, as long as anyone that's reaching out to ask how those funds could be used are directed back to the information on the website and the
Absolutely.
minutes of the meeting. Here's the remediation list, here's the guidelines that have been established, then it's
Absolutely.
up to your entity.
Yeah. You just brought up another good point we talked about, like, this is such a big amount of money. Even just talking to somebody, if you're on this council, gives a power and weight that could be seen as undue, subjectivity and not objectivity, or undue influence. That's how we should handle any question, like, I'm sorry, you know, you may come before us, please go to our website. These meetings are open, please attend the meeting and listen. But Mary's done a great job of making sure that everything's on the website. Y'all have done videos that explain what's going on, so you're right. I wouldn't engage in any discussion like, hey, here's where you go. If you've got a question, direct it to the executive director. Don't try to speak for the council as your individual self. That's the other thing that I've learned from talking to Zach and talking to the general counsel for the governor is, you know, this is really important that we're speaking as a council and not individuals.
Now, I would encourage you, just call Zach. You know? I mean, I learned that when I was at the department. I see Kurt sitting over there. I don't know how many times I called Kurt. Of course, you know, it only took several meetings to get me to do that, but my life got a whole lot easier when I did do that. And so, and that's what we've done here. And it's why I wanted to, you know, put it on the agenda today so we could talk about it and make sure everybody is aware. But Zach will make himself available, and he'll talk to you outside of here. And so anything that you have, I mean, that's to me, that's the knee-jerk reflex is just to give Zach a yell.
And I'll say you're spot on. Matter of fact, I kind of hit the highlights with that initial legal document. Has a statement in it that's all, you almost read it to us. Like what you said was almost exactly what I put in the legal guidance. Anything else before I move on?
If I could just ask you, that information is helpful. You know, as I thought about some of our discussions in here about the value of being able to share information about the town hall meetings and those kinds of things. Obviously, there are groups that are coming and asking those questions directly of me. So it sounds like, as opposed to me in sharing the information that is public information, it's best just to redirect that
Absolutely.
to the website, as opposed to sharing information that's public.
Yeah, to the website, you can give them my email address or the opioid.abatement@tn.gov.
Okay.
That comes to all three of us, and I have some kind of stock email replies that, again, sends them back to the website.
Yeah.
But then I review all of those emails, make sure that it's not something that Dr. Lloyd needs to see or legal staff needs to see, but yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything else? I'll move to the next document then, and this is the one at the top of it. It says Tennessee Opioid Abatement Council Executive Order Number 2 Statement. It's got a blank at the top for printing your name in it, so it's kind of what it was, the one-pager. And this is one of the ones that will have your signature on it. Okay, I draw your attention to this, and just to point out, this travels with this executive order. So this is where you're basically saying, I've received the executive order, I'm familiar with its content, I accept that that will govern our ethical conduct, our conflicts, et cetera. I will note on the form, if you look at the section in the middle, number 3, frankly, what I did there is I was trying to clean it up a little bit because I told you it's not exactly a perfect fit. So, for example, references in the executive order that talks about state employees, et cetera, you should read that as applying to you as council members. Where it talks about forms or reference that the executive branch would use, referenced in this executive order, well, read that to mean like this form you're looking at now, the forms that we create for you in here, okay? So that middle section, part 2 and 3, is basically just sort of squaring up this executive order with this council. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay, and then finally, you'll see a form also for your signature that has Tennessee Opioid Abatement Council interest disclosure at the top. This is about a 3-page form, I think. Yeah. And this is a form where you have the opportunity to disclose anything that you may have, some of the things you have questions or concerns about. So basically, you'll fill out this form. It's modeled after similar forms used in other applications like this. It's sort of the third paragraph down, I'll note is, you know, again, these things are public records, but you need to do it. If you've got questions, again, you can come to us, but also if there's some question we need to sort out with your appointing authority, we can go there for a final answer. And then when you fill it out, and I believe Dr. Lloyd may have already done his, but you'll be going through and checking no or yes. If yes, give your explanation, or again, if you have a yes, you may want to speak with me about it or talk that through, but whatever you're comfortable with. And then, and the things it looks at, for example, is financial interest like investments, et cetera, like that, where you might be perceived as not being neutral, having a conflict, employment, connections with people who've applied for funds, or connections with lobbyists who somehow have an interest in this. And then the biggest one I'd hit you to is the last one on number 6. That's sort of the catch-all. It's just if there's something else that, if it's in your mind, if it's in your heart and you're thinking, I'm not sure about this, I'm worried about this, you need to disclose it. Or at least you need to call me or talk to me / your appointing authority to work through that to determine what's appropriate. So, anybody have any questions about that one or for the group? And Dr. Lloyd, unless there's further discussion, that's my part of that. And Mary, of course, as the executive director, will be gathering documents.
So I will email these out to everyone. Those that are attending virtually, I will send you an email after this meeting with all of these documents so you can review them and sign them, and then you may scan them and then email them back to me. If you're attending this meeting in person and you've reviewed the documents and you're willing to sign today, please, you're welcome to do that, and you can return those documents to me or Ella, and we will take those off your hands before you leave. Commissioner?
And I think it's important to note that the chair has already signed every document, and filled every document out. So for everybody to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have anything else before we move on? Thank you all. I think Clay said at one of our early meetings, none of us want to turn out to be Brett Favre, and I think this is a good way to go about it. In our opening, I forgot to do something. I wanted to do it every meeting, and I wanted to remind everyone in the room of the 3 words that we were given by former AG Slattery, and those were pretty quick. Earmark. This money can't go for anything else. It's to relieve the pain and suffering of Tennesseans as a result of the opioid crisis. The second word is opportunity. We got an opportunity here to set up a treatment system or a system of care for Tennesseans for the next 2 to 3 decades. And last, but certainly not least, is accountability. Tennessee is a financially responsible state. We want to put these funds to things that we know work or we think will work, and we'll be willing to make adjustments when we find out otherwise. And so I think those are always good things for us to have in the back of our head, and I really appreciated those 3 that day, and I will continue to remind us at each of our subsequent meetings. Next up is review and approval of our minutes. So you'll see that there's 4 meeting dates there that we need to approve minutes from. 3 of those were virtual or what we've called emergency meetings, and then the February 27th was our in-person meeting, and I can't even remember where we were. Franklin. Okay, that's right. Sorry, Dr. Moore. We were in Franklin. So I trust that people have had a chance to review those. So I guess I could take a motion to do all of them at one time unless there's an issue with one of them individually.
Move we approve all 4 sets of minutes.
I got a move for approval from Mike Flynn. Do I have a second? Get a second from Karen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I think that was, well, at any rate, they lose anyway. So the motion carries. Thank you. So, as we've done in the past, just quickly, I want to start off with our why. And don't worry, all the appropriate documents have been signed for our why from the people that I use. But this is Jonah. And one of the things that I used to get into in the criminal justice system, and particularly in the hospital as well, is I never thought I saw anybody get better. And it never dawned on me that the only ones I see are the people who are not doing well. There's a lot of people out there that we don't see anymore who are doing really, really well. And I would submit to you there's way more of those than there are the other. There's actually more people living in recovery in the United States right now than there are active addiction, and people don't understand that. But this is my friend and patient, Jonah. He is a product of Judge Dwayne Sloan's drug recovery court in the 4th Judicial District. And Jonah did not have an easy path. He was so excited I was going to tell his story today, by the way. But won't go into great detail, but Jonah's been in and out of the system for a long time, and he's one of the few patients that we ever, resorted to going back to jail before his own safety. And he knew that he is alive and thriving. This is his family. He has since moved from East Tennessee to Clarksville, where he's gainfully employed, and this is he and his family outside of their home in Clarksville. He continues to be involved in the program, and I couldn't be more proud of him. So, guys, the juice is worth the squeeze here. We get to watch people's lives change, and Jonah is one of those. Otherwise, he would be sitting in a jail cell somewhere today, or unfortunately, worse than that. So, kind of keep that little family in the back of your mind as we go throughout our day. This is what we're looking to create. All right, so administrative updates. Mary, the next chunk of this is actually yours.
It is. Okay, we talked about the website just a few minutes ago. I encourage the members to go to the website frequently. I really would love some feedback from you guys. If there's anything that you think that is missing up there, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail here in a minute, but if there's a way to make information more accessible, if you're not able to find information on the website, please let me know. And then again, as we were discussing earlier, please direct anyone to the website. There's also a contact us form. We talked about that. I think when we were here last in Jackson, y'all asked me to set up a contact us form, and Matthew Perriott, our communications director, has set that up, and we're receiving quite a number of contacts. We also have now a community email list. So if people are wanting to receive information about these meetings, the town hall meetings, we're sending that out. I think we're about monthly right now. We've sent out 2 of those community email lists. Travel expense forms. So we are at the end of the state fiscal year. So for those of you that are filling out a travel expense form, we need that back by Tuesday, if at all possible today. So if you have your hotel receipt, and if you can go ahead and fill out your expense form and sign it and get it to Ella before you leave, that will help expedite this process. So we have to have it all turned in by the end of the month for the reimbursements to occur. Any questions on the travel expense forms? All right, technology and emails. We are hoping that our emails are getting through to you guys. Ella has pulled together a document to get the contact information for your assistant and your cell number. That way we can CC any executive assistants that you may have on our emails so they can help you with scheduling and making sure that maybe hotel reservations are being made, items like that. But also ask you to check your junk email and make sure if you're not getting our emails in your regular inbox, maybe they're in your junk email box. Any questions or comments around the emails? Do y'all feel like you're getting emails from us? For the most part, we're trying to send them from Opioid.Abatement so that you can search, and there will be emails from me and Ella from that email address. Okay, I've got some updates on our 2 forms of payment. Community grants application update. Y'all, we are right on target. The timeline that I shared with you guys at the last meeting, we are going to post the announcement of funding in mid-July. Things are going really well with that. Also, lots of progress with Smart Simple and STS for developing the platform. As they develop items, they are moving it into UAT, user acceptance testing. And so Elizabeth and I are already able to get into the UAT environment and look at a lot of these customizations going live. And I just want to give a shout out to the STS team, especially who we call John number one. I know y'all don't know who this is, but his email address is john.2.evans, so we have decided to call him John number one because he is, on the front line customizing this platform, and I cannot wait to get it in front of you guys. Y'all's training will happen in August, so that cruise you were going to go on, no, just kidding. So we're going to have some really good training. Elizabeth and I are going to pull together some good training sessions for you guys. Any questions about the community grant application process? All right, county payments. So as we reported to you guys, we've already pushed out $31.4 million, and that was in February and March. So since then, y'all voted to approve the county semi-annual report. Ella emailed all 95 county mayors a copy of that report so that they can see what they're going to have to fill out come September. At the end of August, beginning of September, they will receive a live form stack form that they will just input their information into, and then that will be due to us September 30th. So, like October, November, December, we're going to have some information about what the counties are doing with their funding, and that will be very exciting to share with you guys and the community. Any questions about the county payments? We're rocking and rolling with that, and we're hoping to get the projections. We're working on a rolling 3-year projection for the counties, and we'll hopefully have that out to everybody within the next month. And then we go into production. We start the next county payments first quarter of 2024, and then rinse, repeat. We're continuing that at least 18 years. Okay, new positions. We talked about this last time, and I did some research, and I'm just wanting some feedback. I'm not asking you guys to vote on this, but just wanting to share with you what information I have found out about the grants analyst positions. So the motion was that we could fill the positions, that the executive director was going to look into possibly using contract positions for the 2 grants analysts. So using the contract position, it does not create a state employee position, but there is a higher cost. I can most likely hire more quickly, and I still I still interview them just like a regular position. With the state employee, the budgeted amount would be less. It may take a little bit longer to hire. Not quite sure on that, but I still would interview and select the candidate. But I just wanted to hear from you guys. Is this the information that is helpful? Does anybody have any advice? Are you still leaning towards these being contract positions? I'm just curious, y'all's thoughts around this.
Mary, it's Stephanie Vanderpool. So are we saying that it would be $129,645 per year for 1 grant analyst with a contract rate versus what you have is $141.70 per year? So why is there such a difference? I mean, I don't understand. Are we underpaying our state employees? I don't understand why the contract rate is that much higher.
Yes, that would. I will let Commissioner speak to that. So good question, Stephanie. To use a contract position, we contract with a vendor, and then that vendor hires the position. So there is a middleman, air quotes, middleman payment. So it is, you're right, it's $70,754 versus $129,645. The person doesn't see that. That is the out-of-pocket cost. So the person doesn't see that money. That's what it costs us.
It seems like there should be another option for contracting. It seems like I understand that there our middleman, but we could also 1099 somebody outside of middleman service.
This is the only option that I have as a state employee to contract, is to
Gotcha.
go through this vendor. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
I was one of the strongest advocates for contracting because I thought it would be cheaper and more flexible, especially if we didn't have to do benefits. I wasn't aware that your hands were tied as a state employee. You couldn't 1099 somebody and make it clean.
Right.
You had to go through a middle person.
Yes.
So I retract all my bullish comments. In the face of raw fiscal responsibility, I argue that we should reconsider making these state employees because we wouldn't have to pay a 70% premium.
Okay, all right. Taryn?
I was just asking, he said benefits, and I was wondering, were benefits included in the contracted position? Were the benefits there? Because as a state employee, benefits, I would assume, the
8%.
person would have benefits. So that was just my question.
That's about
Can I make a comment on that? So even with benefits, it's still gonna be much less than if you contract because of what we have to contract off of. Clay, I very much appreciate your comment, because the other part of this is not just that it's higher cost, even if you include benefits, it's also harder if the person's not working directly for you. And we've had issues with that in our hospitals, where we might have to contract through the agency that the state will only let us contract through. So having the person that works for you, that you call to accountability, is really helpful.
Well, even if you add 38% to it, you still come up at 98,000,
Yeah, yeah.
if my napkin math is correct.
Yeah.
So, we'd still be, we're still coming out ahead by making a state position, and then
Agreed.
And I'm,
they're under the magnanimous thumb of Mary as
well, and
Zip Recruiter.
And I am pretty sure I'm gonna need this position 12 months out of the year, because once we go, like I said, once we go into production, there is going to be plenty of work for these positions to do. Okay, thank you. Yes, Tommy?
I would only comment, it's at a minimum of 38%. It could be actually more depending on what the benefit package looks like. So it could be, and at a minimum, you're gonna be over 100,000. I assure you, I have 18 contract employees now, and that 70,000 price range, is gonna cost you substantially more if they're a state employee. Now, you do pay the additional, rate per hour on the contract employees, but they do very much work for you. They work for you, they answer to you. Now, going through the contracting company, the state has a contracting service that we are required to use, but you work very closely with them, and they will tailor the jobs and the positions for exactly what you want, and you can also feed the individuals to them. But you can definitely work with them, and it is a contract position, and you do have the ability to end that contract if necessary.
Tony, I would say that's not been our experience.
And
So I hear what
yeah.
yours has been, but this is such an important council.
Mhm.
And with the fact that even if you add benefits, ours don't actually come out to the amount you're quoting, it's still less in cost. And we also truly, real time, get to make decisions, but our experience has not been yours. I'm glad yours has been so good.
It has. It's been a really good experience.
I think people are scared of Tommy.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right, they're
But it-
working with, that's another good point, it's the TBI, yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Can I make one more comment?
Yes.
The only other thing that does offer you guys is it gives you, some of the contract employees that I would hire are individuals that are very experienced. They are already also, they may be retired law enforcement, they come in from other parts of the country, and we bring in a very, very experienced crew, and most of the time, it's not a train-up issue. It's an issue where they can hit the ground running. As a matter of fact, I would even go as far as to say many of them are more experienced and educated in the fields than I am. And so you're not limited to one specific. If you needed to recruit a specific or special skill set, you can do that. And it's been my benefit. It doesn't stop you just because you go through a contracting company. It doesn't stop you from presenting the individuals to the contracting company for them to employ. So I hate it that your experience has been bad. Mine's been really good, but I will say that we recruited the individuals that we went after, and it's been a good opportunity for them. They didn't need the benefits. They already retired or they already had benefits, and theirs was a compensation rate, but you do pay a little bit more on the compensation side.
It is a good point that somebody might want to do 0.2 FTEs, and we might get 2 of those people that are sitting around somewhere.
Right.
And they've maybe have served the state before, or maybe they've been in this end of the healthcare profession or, companies before, and they have experience. You know, they're not a 30-something who's starting a second job after, you know, working at a drinks bar or something. So I think that, I think I hear what you're saying, Tommy, that there are certain individuals that might not want a full-time position. They might avail of their expertise. But I think as we've got this thing approved, I mean, if you
Sounds like I have flexibility.
you could fill one, and then you could come back to us and say, hey, I filled one, you guys said for contract, and got a contract with this. I think we've given you some flexibility as a director to do either or, not both and, based on what the need is. We just need to come back, and we need to make that obviously in the meeting, decided and all of that.
Yeah, the other thing is that we already have a contracts team that works very well. We actually oversee more contracts than any other department in state government, almost 1,300, and then amendments, et cetera. So whoever might get added would be able to be overseen by a really strong contracts team that's underneath Zach. And so if you compare the cost, I mean, I guess what I would recommend that if we could go with the same quality, less cost, so that we put every dollar we can into the services. That's my recommendation to the group.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate the feedback. All right, I've got a couple more here. Okay, fiscal update. At every meeting, I give an update on the current opioid abatement trust fund statement. And so each month we get a statement from the fiscal folks. And if you look at this, you can see the county distributions that went out, the $31.4 million, just so exciting here. And you can see the various deposits that have come in. And we're standing at $78,815,564.88. Any questions about the trust fund statement? Okay. This next one, guidance for web postings. I initially brought this up at our last virtual meeting, and it was called transparency policy. And so for better clarification, I've modified the language here to guidance on web postings. And so in an effort to ensure that all relevant information and data are posted on the Opioid Abatement Council's website, the office is asking the council to approve the development of a guidance on web postings. And really kind of what we're looking for here is to possibly include policy information that's already available in public records that we know that people are going to be interested in. And we can make sure that we are continuously and regularly posting those on our website. So this is something, Dr. Lloyd and I talked about this. We're wanting to be open, we're wanting to be transparent, we're putting information up on the website. But if something happened and I'm not here next month, Dr. Lloyd's not here next month, what is the guidance? What's the legacy? What's the cadence as far as making sure that that information is posted on the website? And there's possibly things that I haven't considered that need to be posted on the website, and I'm wanting to make sure I get that guidance from you guys. So what I'm asking is for you guys to ask us to develop a policy that we will bring back to you guys for a discussion and approval.
Yeah, and I'll chime in just a little bit. We just thought it was important going forward. I mean, you know, none of us are here for the entire 18 years, or probably not going to be here for the entire 18 years. And so we want something out there that the public has access to, that they know what our line of thinking is and how we're going to do things, and that will carry on. Now, subsequent councils can modify it as they see fit going forward to meet their needs. But we felt like it was important to have this up front, and so that's what we're asking for is a motion that will allow our team within the department to create this and bring it back to us for comment, further development, and approval. Any thoughts?
Motion.
All right. So we got a motion to develop a transparency policy from, Judge Sexton. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Brian Buck. Any further discussion?
Can we do a roll call vote?
Well, you can. We will do a roll call vote, but I guess you will call the roll.
I will call the roll.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. That's my fault on the last one for excluding our folks, our members who are joining us. Yes.
I apologize on the discussion part. Is the formal title of this policy guidance for web posting, or is it transparency?
This is working title.
Okay. Right now, it's a working title. We'll have to come up with a title.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea, it's on web postings, but it's part of the transparency, so that'll be what they come back to us with, and we can discuss it at that point.
I got you. When I heard transparency, I thought we were talking about ethics again, and
Yeah, when I think about transparency like this, at least in my mind, I like everybody knowing what we've spent money on, and then what our expectations are, and then how we're following. I mean, that's what I have in my mind. And so, but my mind gets crazy sometimes. So right now, when we talk about transparency with regards to this, it's not related to what Zach was talking about earlier. It's related about, web postings and what we try to make available to, to the public.
I suggest communication policy.
Sure. Yes. Okay, made a note.
That's a good motion.
No, that's good.
No.
I did.
Ready.
I've got still got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, so Mary, we'll proceed with the roll call vote.
Armando, Brian Buck,
Yes.
Casey Cox, Sharm Allen,
Yes.
Clay Jackson,
Yes.
Karen Pershing,
Yes.
Ken Moore, Lisa Tipton, Mike Flynn,
Yes.
Shane Sexton,
Yes.
Stephanie Vanterpool,
Yes.
Stephen Lloyd,
Yes.
Tim Fournette,
Yes.
Tommy Farmer,
Yes.
Wayne Wyckoff.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Outstanding. All right, moving on to our standards and metrics subcommittee. I think Lisa is going to give us an update. Is that correct?
Yes, I
Didn't know.
am. Karen and I.
Yeah, but I have a strikeout through Karen's name and Lisa written in, so I don't know if Karen did that or not, but.
Well, Mary mentioned it to me, and I'm like, well, I think Karen's got it, but I'll be happy to share, but
Before we get started, can I say something real quick? 'Cause I want to bring in your and I's conversation around this real quick. So when we look at standards and metrics subcommittee, and I think we're going to talk about housing today, this is not targeting housing. This is just a standing subcommittee to look at metrics for anything that we come up against. So, the thing that always pops to my mind is OBOT. All right, and so we had an issue with that in our state. We still have an issue with it, but we have rules and guidelines that are currently in place that the department monitors, and I think people are pretty comfortable with that process. I'm not saying it wouldn't be something we look at in here. It's just we started with something that a lot of us had questions about, and I think here in a little bit, Kurt's going to give us an update on the needs assessment, and so I'm anxiously awaiting that. But I know from the previous 7 needs assessments in the state of Tennessee that number 1 on that, on all of them, was housing.
Yeah.
So I didn't want anybody to think we're targeting housing. We're not targeting housing. That's why this is not called a housing subcommittee. It's standards and metrics that will apply to basically everything we look at to make sure that we have oversight that this council is comfortable with. Yeah. So there we go, Lisa.
Okay, well, and I also thought that Charm would take it if she was here because she is the attorney, but I'll just jump right in with that opening frame up. And we did come up with just a working definition to toss out to the board to see what people think about it. And it's in the PowerPoint slides. I'll just read over it. Then, of course, y'all can read it for yourself. If applying for recovery housing funding, applicants will be required to show current certification and/or recognition status through a state and/or nationally recognized recovery resident standards organization any affiliate of any nationally recognized recovery resident standards organization, or the applicant must be currently funded by the state of Tennessee or a federal department or agency to support and or create a recovery residence. And we had quite a bit of thoughtful discussion about all the different components of that definition and what were some standards that we would want to ascribe to for the people who would be seeking this funding, but also mindful that Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse already has the Creating Homes initiative. There's block grant, there's SOAR, there's ARP. As Commissioner Williams mentioned, there are a mass amount of contracts out there that already have standards for what you can use pass-through funding or new funding or ongoing funding to support. And that's what that last part brings into bearance. I do think with that definition, it was a little presumed on my part that a lot of the applicants might already have access to those guidelines, but if they didn't, it may be a role of this council to put some of those definitions in a document that we would put out, because I felt like most of the people applying would meet one of these components of the definition, but I think some of the ones in the first part would be more easily, somebody could Google those and find those organizations and get that list. And if you're not already in network with Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse or Department of Human Services, Department of Children's Services, Department of Health, there's many divisions of state government that could fall under the second part of that. And I think that it would be good to see if those are easily located on the state website, or if that would be something that we may need to point people to in a document.
Any discussion around this, Brian? I don't know. Do you have a foot in this space? Yes,
We do,
Okay,
yeah.
so what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it covers it, in terms of, if you operate a state-funded recovery housing, the scope of services will have standards in it that the provider is required to meet. So that currently funded by the state of Tennessee or federal department really captures any current providers.
Anybody else?
How long does it take to get one of these certificates? I know nothing about this. I guess the quandary I'm in is someone who's been and that we have no history of, but are able to get a certificate that would meet this criteria. Is it hard? Is it hard to get that?
It depends on which.
Sorry?
It depends upon which certification you go after.
So I'm thinking there's different levels.
Yes, sir. It depends, but what I think will be important in this are the other questions that an applicant answers. This is just one section, right? So you'll see this section, but you'll have a lot more also to look at, like what's the history that they've been doing this work? Have there been any complaints? Are they licensed? Because we also license in our state.
So this is a threshold that they must meet. Then you go on and go further. Yeah.
Yes. And so I'm gonna, when we get into our educational component of our meeting here in a little while, I'm gonna talk about this just briefly, but this is the one that keeps me up at night, if I'm honest. And not necessarily for Tennessee, but what I've seen around the country. And I had Mary send the article to you on the housing shuffle in Florida. I'm not saying we have that in Tennessee. We don't. But those are things that we don't want. And so I think that, I appreciate the work you all did, Lisa. I know you met at least twice, and and, you know, giving us some kind of framework to start, because, you know, this is to get your foot in the door. Now, we want to see the other things that you've done. I mean, did you start up last week, and is your house, you know, framed right now and doesn't have a roof on it, right? I mean, those kind of things. And so, I think this is a good place to start. I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to, you know, to weigh in, because this is not my area of expertise at all. But I do understand how it fits in a recovery-oriented system of care, and it's the biggest need in our state.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming if we had an application and part of the funding piece was about recovery housing, that we could ask to see pictures, we could, you know, I mean, we're free to gain information, right? This is a condition of participation this is the lowest bar. And then we can also ask for any information that we want to evaluate their application, right? And if we have questions, we could reject a portion of the funding and say, follow up in X number of days with this information, and we might fund or fully fund. I'm assuming we would have that flexibility.
Yes.
Yeah, and that
This is not all or none, but this is a minimum standard.
just because you have this doesn't mean we're going to fund you.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, we want to be very clear about that.
Yes.
But it's like when, you know, you guys were developing the grant application process. We've got to have somewhere to start.
Yes.
And I think this is, you know, when I talked to Lisa about it, I mean, I've known Lisa for a long time. I know what she does. We also don't want to put extra administrative burden on people who've already been doing this, right? Particularly whenever their track record is what it's been. So this is kind of exactly the same thing, Clay, is that it's a starting point, that whenever we're reviewing the initial application, if you don't have any of this, then it becomes pretty easy, right? Go back and get one of these, and then we can go from there.
I'm with Shane. I know very little about this area of care, but I like the way this is structured because it's simple, it's easy to read. It's easy for me to understand what I need to do if I were running an entity and we were going to add recovery housing. This is very plain that I understand what I need to do to get involved.
And my experience with this has been that we can do the best job in the world, and there's still going to be situations come up that are gray, and it's going to happen. But we've got to get started somewhere, and I think this is a good start. I appreciate the work. Exactly what we were looking for. Because, you know, if y'all remember, when we started this discussion, we started getting into local housing codes, and I mean, Lord, that's where I don't need to be, all right? And so I think this is a good start for us. All right, anybody else? All right, do I have a motion to approve our definition of recovery housing?
I vote.
I got a motion by Dr. Jackson. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, a second by Karen. Any further discussion? All right, can we do a roll call vote again?
Yes.
Mary?
Armando, Brian Buck,
Yes.
Casey Cox, Sharm Allen,
Yes.
Clay Jackson,
Yes.
Karen Pershing,
Yes.
Ken Moore, Lisa Tipton,
Yes.
Mike Flynn,
Yes.
Shane Sexton,
Yes.
Stephanie Vanterpool,
Yes.
Stephen Lloyd,
Yes.
Tim Fournette,
Yes.
Tommy Farmer,
Yes.
Wayne Wyckoff.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The motion carries. If you look at our agenda, we are comfortably ahead of schedule. I'll say that very cautiously because I know what's coming up. If it's okay with everybody, I've got Kurt over there. He's chomping at the bits and giving me the stank eye. So, Kurt, unless anybody is opposed, then we'll take a biological break after Kurt. But I think it fits very nicely with what we just talked about. And I'm guessing here, but I don't think there's probably been many changes in our needs assessment. So, Kurt, unless anybody has an objection, we will let Kurt Hippel present our 2023 annual needs assessment for the state of Tennessee.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. Thank you, Opioid Abatement Council, for having me back. It's great to be in West Tennessee, in Jackson. Want to remind y'all of why y'all have me come back, hopefully, in next year and the year after that. But TCA, Title 33-11-105, one of the requirements for this council before rendering decisions regarding disbursement of the funds is that you'll receive input from the Department's statewide planning and policy council's need assessment process, which is conducted with the assistance of our 7 regional planning and policy councils, as well as some standing committees of the Statewide Planning and Policy Council. As I look around the room here today, I see a lot of support from the statewide and regional planning and policy councils. I want to thank Albert Richardson, our statewide chair, for being here. I want to thank Debbie Hillen and Richard Barber, who were immediate past presidents or past chairs of Region 5 and Region 6, respectively. These are people that are involved in the community. They can be providers, they can be advocates, they can be service recipients, family members of service recipients. Sometimes they're all of those things. And they have a really good perspective on what is needed in each individual region across the state. You see this map in front of you. We have 7 regional councils from Memphis to Mountain City. They meet quarterly. They do a great job of bringing issues to the department, to the commissioner, to our divisions. We use this information that we gather through the needs assessment to create our 3-year plan. As you see here, there's a breakdown of kind of what they do and what I just went over. Next slide, please. So the needs assessment is done annually. We're required to do it per Title 33. We ensure the most relevant needs are prioritized by asking, like I said before, statewide and regional councils to complete the needs assessment. We just completed our 2023 needs assessment this spring. And as I said before, there's a lot of involvement from those 7 regions and then those standing committees of the statewide council. The 2023 needs assessment survey summary is online, and I would encourage y'all, I'm going to go over kind of a briefer document, but if you go on to that link, you'll see every need identified by every region and every standing committee. They're allowed to provide up to 3 needs for mental health and up to 3 needs for substance use. The process helps the department in 2 ways, as you see there. Helps us identify regional needs and assets in order to influence the mental health and substance abuse system, and it provides a method for the department to target limited state resources to more effectively and efficiently meet the identified needs. We've been very blessed over the last several years through the leadership of Commissioner Williams and the interest and dedication from the legislature and Governor Hazelman and Governor Lee that we've gotten a lot of new funding. But these are limited funds, and we need to make sure that they're used in the most efficient and effective way. Next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, so that document that you're linked to, that will give you a bigger overview of the specific needs that each region and standing committee brought up. This right here, there's also a separate document on our website that touches on what we're about to go over, which are needs that were identified by multiple regions across the state. And you'll see the first one, and we're focusing on the substance abuse needs because of the Opioid Abatement Council's purview. But the first need, increased funding / number of and access to residential and detox beds for adults and children. This is a need that has been identified for several years in a row, and I want to draw your attention before I get to anything else to that asterisk at the bottom. We bring these needs before our Planning and Budget Committee with the statewide council, and they were nice enough to acknowledge that the department has created or expanded programs to address these needs in the past and on an ongoing basis. So even though you see that these needs have been brought up year after year, it doesn't mean that the department hasn't acted to try to address those. Those are just needs that continue to be out there in the community. So regional councils 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, and the Children's Committee identified that first need. And the good news here, and something that y'all need to know about, is that in the FY24 budget, there was some relief that was provided for this need. There was about $12 million in non-recurring funding that the legislature and Governor Lee directed to substance use residential treatment bed infrastructure that we think will have an impact on this need. The second need you see there, increased prevention and school-based programs for at-risk youth, again identified for several years. Regional Council 3 and 7 brought that to our attention again this year. Again, the FY24 budget has provided for some funds to address this need. There's been expansion, I think, of about $8 million for the school-based behavioral health liaison program, to expand that to, I think, 140-something more liaisons in the schools. The Tennessee Gambling Fund, its purpose was expanded beyond just problem gambling to serve at-risk youth as well. So some of those funds that come in from the gambling fees that are generated can be used for that purpose. And then also the FY23 provided some 24 budget provided for some funds to address the juvenile justice diversion project that the department administers. Number 3, y'all are just talking about it, increased recovery housing, including medication-assisted treatment, individuals who are engaged in that type of treatment. Again, identified for multiple years. Something that we are engaging in. I would like to also recognize Kyle Duvall. I think he's in the room. Him and Susan, did you step up? Him and Susan Benz came and addressed the Statewide Planning and Policy Council about the standards that y'all were just talking about and gave them a better understanding of the recovery housing situation in the state. As Lisa just talked about, the SAFE Act and SAFE Act 2 were pieces of legislation that were passed a few years ago to ensure that high standards were being met in these recovery housing situations. So continues to be a need, but something that, as I sat here and listened today, I'm encouraged that y'all are focusing on that. The last substance use need that was identified by multiple regions, transportation. I think the Region 1 and the Consumer Advisory Board took a more universal approach to this need. They're trying to reduce any barriers someone would have to making an appointment or engaging in a healthy activity. So in general, they're asking, or they're identifying a need for being able, for people to be able to be transported, not just to appointments, but because I was just chatting with Tara and our Assistant Commissioner for Substance Abuse Services, we do provide transportation for those types of services, but I think this need is really speaking to a more universal transportation. Can we get to another doctor's appointment? Can I get to a church service? Can I get to the grocery store? Can I get to the place where I need to pay my rent? Those are the 4 that were identified by multiple regions. Again, I would encourage you to take a look at our more in-depth needs assessment summary. Mary, Dr. Lloyd, that's all I have for y'all this year.
Kurt, thank you. And, I look up there and so I was talking to Maria about, some of these things have been recurring year after year after year. And I'd like for you all to, if you can, kind of take a snapshot of this in your brain and hang on to it until we get into the work of the council here, because see where these things fit into a recovery ecosystem. I'm going to talk about medication. I'll talk about medication because it's controversial. It's tiny, right? We make a difference in people's lives with the basic things that we're talking about on this screen right here. And one of the things that Kurt was talking about was transportation, right? There's doctor's appointments, but when you're in the criminal justice system, you better show up at your PO's office on time, right? And if you don't have transportation, reliable transportation, that becomes an issue. And now you can see where you can start to where the wheels can start to come off. So I really hope that we're able to make a dent in this. To me, this is an exciting time when you see the number of years and these things that have continued to be on there. And what a difference it makes. So keep this in mind as we present a recovery ecosystem, and then some of our other council members are going to focus in on those areas within that ecosystem. And I think, not to put any pressure on you, but Lisa, yours is, the majority of this, right? That's what it is. So, Kurt, do you have anything? Does anybody have anything else, or comments or feedback for Kurt?
So I was going to say, we're pulling together a training manual for the Opioid Abatement Council members when it comes your time to review the community grant applications, and we will add this to the training manual so you will have it as a reference.
The only other thing I'd add is that the Office of Planning, which with the regional councils, produces this needs assessment and do a great job. Avis Easley, Kirby Fye, Amy Holland and Lane Lanusa. They are in the process right now of working with our Deputy Commissioner for Community Behavioral Health, Matt Yancey, to provide a department update on how we're responding to these needs. That's something that we've been doing the last few years. That should be available sometime in mid-July. So that's something I can get to Mary so that she can distribute to y'all as well, just so y'all know what the department is doing and how we're responding.
And we're not, we're not starting in this whole process from ground zero. There's been a lot of work that's already been done, and Tennessee has assets. We have a lot of assets. And I think, with, General Slatery's 3 words in mind, I think this council looking at how to supplement and tie things together, I think is a good way to look at it, and that's what I'm going to try to present in my section of our next part of our meeting. It's 20 after 1, so about 1:35. Come back and we'll get started with the afternoon and hopefully get out of here in a reasonable time. Thank you. All right. Tim, you're the only one I can see on the computer. Can you see the screen? I have my presentation on your computer screen.
I don't think he hurt you, Dr.
I don't think he did either. He's very interested.
Yeah.
We can see,
Wayne Wyckoff
we can see
is
the
on.
screen.
Oh, it's Stephanie.
Oh, Stephanie, can you see it, Stephanie?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, all right, thanks, Stephanie. So thanks everybody for coming back in at a reasonable time. The next section here, we've actually had this idea a while back, and I don't want to talk down to anybody. I never want that to be the case, but it dawned on me that we have folks on our council that have specific experiences that put you on this council, but you may not have a global understanding of the term we talk about when we talk about a recovery ecosystem. And so the idea was that I'm going to take 2 parts of this. I'm going to show you the overall ecosystem, and it's not meant to be complete. There'll never be a complete one, but it's a good framework to get started. I'm going to show you some intervention points within that system, and then I'm going to talk about MAT. When I talk about MAT, I'm going to talk about medication-assisted treatment, and there's 3 of them. There's naltrexone, buprenorphine, and methadone. I'm going to show you how that fits in. That's just my little segment. I've picked 5 other members of our council that have specific expertise in one of these areas of this recovery ecosystem, and I really got the idea from Clay. Clay says, I want to hear somebody's best 10 minutes. Well, my best 10 minutes is going to be times 2 because I have 2 things. But these are our best 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes on our specific areas of expertise. Although I hate to use that word because I don't know anybody that's a true expert on any of this. So if we could, unless it's a burning desire, you save your questions till the end because I'd like to try to get through all of them. We're ahead of schedule. But, I've got Tommy who's going to talk about, the law enforcement impact. It's one thing to go out here and say, okay, let's just spread medication all across the hills of Tennessee, and that'll solve our problem. It actually won't. And there's things to talk about with regards to that, and we certainly have faced them in our state with regards to clinics that looked a whole lot like the pain clinics that we were dealing with, a decade ago. And so there's always unintended consequences to things, and none of us work in a silo. So before we get started, I want you to understand this concept because I didn't really get it. If we've got $672 million coming in that we know about. It's going to be more than that. If we took all $672 million and we threw it in this system and we said, we're just going to treat people, what would that do to our stock in the middle? Our stock, when I hear the word stock, I want you to think of people using drugs. If we put all of our money into treatment, what would that do to our actual number of people using drugs, our stock? Anybody? Probably wouldn't have much of an effect on it at all because we're just focusing on the outflow and we haven't talked anything at all about the inflow. Think of it like filling up a bathtub, right? I mean, you eventually got to start to figure out a way to turn the faucet off. And so when we talk about this system of care, you can't just allocate all of your resources into one area. It becomes a balance, and you have to try to figure out how to allocate resources in order to bankrupt the system. And I'm not talking about bankrupting it financially. I'm talking about bankrupting that stock, that group of people who are actively using. So if you look at an inflow into it and an outflow out of it, what are your possibilities in the outflow? Well, people get into recovery. That's one possibility. Another possibility is they kind of flounder back and forth. They still actively use it and get a little bit of recovery, and and then they die. Right? Those are your three outcomes that that you're going to have. So if you allocate all your resources to that, you're still going to have those outcomes, and you're still going to have people coming into the system. It's why the dope dealer doesn't worry about selling people fentanyl that's going to kill them. He doesn't care. Right? Why? Because he hasn't done anything to do with the inflow. You're going to have two people out there to replace him in your business model. That is a fact. Yeah. So when we start thinking about this and how to allocate our funds, we can kind of keep that in our mind, and I'm going to go through it a little bit and try to hopefully explain it a little better than I've started. So the first thing I want to do, I want to give you my best 5 to 6 minutes on addiction. Okay. So addiction is not a moral failure, guys. This is actually a disorder of the brain. You got two areas of your brain that are in constant competition with each other. One is very deep within where my two fingers meet. Right? If you can imagine where that is, it's our reward system. Food, water, sex, things that bring us pleasure. Okay? The other system I want to talk about is our frontal lobe. I call that first system GO, right? Pleasurable things, food, water, sex, things everybody can relate to. The frontal lobe is our stop system. It gives us insight, judgment, and empathy. Okay? So these two areas of our brain are in constant contact with each other. Neurologically developed when we're 23 and 25, these two systems are fully wired and fully connected. Okay? And so all of us look at our day every single day and we say, okay, I can take this action, it's going to bring me this reward, but here are the consequences from it, and we usually have choices. And so what we wind up doing is we wind up picking the action that gives us the most amount of pleasure with the least amount of consequences. And we do that all day long, every day. Everybody in this room does. That's how we get through our day. So now I want you to imagine taking that frontal lobe that's responsible for insight, judgment, and empathy, and getting rid of it. Then a frontal lobotomy. We go up in there tonight and we just sever the connections. Now you're controlled completely by your reward system. All of us would be in jail by noon. Okay? We would. We'd be in jail by noon if that's all you're controlled by. So you have to realize that people who are actively addicted, their use has gone from impulsive, I need to use, to compulsive, I have to use or I'm going to die. That's what we're dealing with. So Judge Sloan used to, when I first met him, he'd talk about this. He said, I just can't understand, Steve. You got a pregnant woman come into your court. She's got a baby inside of her. She continues to use heroin. How is that possible? They got this precious thing. That's how it's possible. I'm not condoning it. But what would you do to get the thing that you thought you had to have or you were going to die? And I'll tell you, you'll do anything. And that goes for anybody in this room. So people with addiction in their stop and go system have lost access, most of the access to the frontal lobe of their brain, and they're driven solely by the reward system. It's how somebody goes out to the dope dealer knowing there's fentanyl in the drug that they're buying and knowing fentanyl can kill them, but use it anyway. None of us would do it. We'd take a fentanyl test strip and go, oh, that's got fentanyl in it. I don't want it. Well, that's not how it works, right? Because we all have functioning frontal lobes. People with addiction, don't have that. So whenever we're treating people with addiction and we get them off of the drug, right, it takes their frontal lobe a while to come back online, right, to where they start to show insight, judgment, and empathy. So these are actually brain scans, PET scans of human brains, Norvocal. It's actually old work, 1993. But this gives you a little bit of an idea, because we start talking about things like detox. If I bring somebody in, I bring Brian Buck in, and I detox him. And 10 days later, I say, all right, Brian, you're off the heroin, you're not going to get dope sick anymore, have a good life, and I send you back out into the world. How long does Brian last? About a day, if he's lucky. If he's really lucky, he can go a week. Most of the time, that day. Why? Because when I send Brian out, this is the brain I send him out with. This top row of brains, these are PET scans of brains. Top row of brains are normal brains, right? If all areas are lit up, frontal lobes lit up, all the reward system, it's all lit up. This is a normal brain. The second row of brains are brains that have been detoxed off of drugs for 10 days. And look what happens in the frontal lobe. There's nothing there. This person is running solely on the reward system. And you say, how in the world can you get out of a hospital from open heart surgery and stick a needle in your arm 2 minutes after getting out? This is why. This is why. Right? It makes complete sense. I see judges in particular get frustrated with this all the time. It makes complete sense to me. I'm not condoning it. When I started to learn this, it started to help me meet my patients where they are. Right, so let's look at this bottom row of brains. Brains have been detoxed for 100 days. Look what's starting to come back in 3 months. All right, we're starting to gain insight, judgment, and empathy. When I went to treatment back in 2004, I got 95 days of high-quality inpatient treatment. Guys, that is the gold standard, and it's wonderful. And by the time I came out, I had this community around me of people that were supporting me in my recovery. I had a six-figure income. I had my own house. I had my own car, and I got an MD degree hanging on my wall and a state of Tennessee medical license. I had a lot of recovery assets, right? Our folks don't have that. Our challenge is to build a system that gives them the best shot at that. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. So if you look at when I came out of treatment in Nashville, I already started to have some of this, and I had a system of care set up. And here's the kicker. Because of the way things work in Tennessee, I had 5 years of aftercare and follow-up. If you can get to somebody 5 years in recovery, what are their chances of getting to 18 years? Anybody know? It's about 90%. You get somebody to 5 years, their chances of getting to 15 years is about 90%. So I want you to keep this in mind. Now, why do people relapse? They relapse because of cravings, and cravings are lifelong. Been in recovery almost 19 years. I still have cravings. I don't use because I've got tools that I have developed over these 19 years, and I've got a great support system. And oh, by the way, I really like my life. All right? And so that's what we're trying to get our folks to see and do, but they're not going to have the things that I had at the start of my recovery. So this 3-month period is really critical. How long does it take to go from here to here? 2 years. 2 years. Why do I like medication? Okay, does medication need to be used always? No. There are times it doesn't need to be. There are inpatient treatment programs. There's other things we can do that people do really well. But the people that need medication, I like it because it quells cravings. It can help us retain them in the treatment process while we help them recover from their addiction. That's why I love medications. They're anti-craving medications. They control cravings to give you a chance to go to work on your underlying issues that are driving your addiction in the first place. And guys, addiction is 3 things. It's genetic, trauma, and opportunity. Okay, that's what it is. And one of the most effective forms of treatment is whenever we start digging into that trauma and help people start. You're not going to make it go away, but you can learn to live peacefully with it. I tell them all the time. My childhood trauma consisted of physical and sexual abuse. It happened. It's a fact. It hasn't gone away, but it's no longer the boogeyman in the closet, and that's where we're at. So, we talk about MAT. It's the standard of care for opioid use disorder. Okay, people that need it, need it. All right, is it diverted? Yes, and I've got some statistics on that. I'll be glad to answer questions afterwards. But the truth is the juice is worth the squeeze. But I'm talking about as part of a comprehensive treatment program. I'm not talking about somebody selling it out the end of a bait shop on Douglas Lane. Okay, the 3 medications are naltrexone, buprenorphine, and methadone, sold under the trade name of Vivitrol. Buprenorphine sold under the trade name of a lot of things: Suboxone, Subutex, Bunavail, Sublocade, which is an injectable that I actually love. And I can't remember if I missed one there. Did I miss one? Zubsolv, right. And then last but not least is methadone. And some of you in the room see methadone and the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Okay, it shouldn't stand up. Methadone's a life-saving medication, and there are people out there who need it, particularly with some of the tolerances that we see when we're dealing with this awful scourge of fentanyl. Because the tolerances I see in 2023 are nothing like the tolerances I saw in 2013, and it's all secondary to fentanyl. It's a different animal, guys, a different animal altogether. All right, stigma is the biggest obstacle to treatment, and that stigma comes from everywhere. It comes from treatment centers, doctors, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, pharmacists, hospitalists, and hospital staff.
And from within.
We've got people that are in the hospital right now getting treatment for endocarditis that are going through drug withdrawals, and they've got access to medication that can help them with their drug withdrawals, but the hospital won't give it to them. But they won't give it to them not because they're bad people, but most of the time they don't understand the role, and they don't have active addiction medicine doctors who are willing to step into this and help them with it with consult services. All right, hospitals are a prime target. Emergency departments are a prime target to help bend the needle for these folks. Pharmacists. Most pharmacists out there are good people. I haven't seen anybody out to hurt people. But a lot of times there's a misconception about the role of medication, particularly when the provider is not being part of the treatment process themselves and communicating with the pharmacist. Most of these things we can overcome, and it's not going to cost us any money. So the role of medication, 1, anti-craving. If I can stop my patient from craving, then I can hold them in the treatment process, and we can start to work on these underlying drivers of their addiction and social determinants of health to hopefully put them back out into society as a productive member, like my friend Jonah. So, quick stories. This is my friend Brooke. It's taken about 7 hours. She realized she was pregnant in Ohio, didn't know her at this time. They Googled a doctor who would take pregnant girls who are using IV drugs. They found me. Her mom called me. I said, bring her. I was in Murfreesboro. She was in another state up north. It took her about 7 hours to get there. That's the picture they took of Brooke before they brought her to me.
I love, taking care of pregnant women. You get to watch miracles happen. And this is a picture of Brooke. We got Brooke in Tennessee. She got on TennCare, so she didn't have to pay a doctor $125, $150 a week just to write her prescription. And, oh, by the way, do nothing for her underlying mental illness or drivers of addiction in the first place. And I kept her for a long time, up until she was about 36 weeks. When she was 36 weeks, she wanted to go back home, and I about died, because what's back home? Something called a baby daddy. And a baby daddy is also was in prison and just gotten out for his own intravenous use. So I was really worried about Brooke going back. Plus, she didn't have me there. I'm not special. I took her TennCare. She didn't have to pay me cash. She had resources. We were getting her help with the trauma, and we were treating her underlying bipolar disorder. But when she went back, she didn't have those things, and she started to struggle. But before that, she sent me this picture of her and her daughter, Ava. And if you look at Brooke there, that's 32 weeks. So Brooke's a dime. Y'all know what a dime is? It's a 10. Brooke is a 10. Brooke got put in jail after a slip. Her mom was keeping Ava. Doctors in jail stopped her medication. Not doctors, the jail staff. She didn't see a doctor. So somebody without a medical license told her she didn't need her medication. They didn't treat her underlying mental health issues. And when she got out, they didn't give her a referral to anybody who could do any of those. On the morning of December 13th, 2020, my phone rang, and it was Brooke's mom. She found Brooke in her bed, cold and blue. She died of an acute overdose of heroin and fentanyl. Brooke is one of the 107,622 that died in that year nationwide. This is what I'm talking about. This is a systems death. The system let this down. You say, well, it's over. Well, it's not really over, because Brooke left this behind. And this is Ava. She's 2 years old. She was potty training. Brooke's mom was in this picture not long ago. So Ava's ACEs score, Adverse Childhood Experience score, is the same number of years she is. She's 2 years old, and her Adverse Childhood Experience score is already a 2. If we don't help this child, what are the chances are she's in this system in 10 years? And I can tell you it's really high. Compare that to this dude. Same disease, addiction. That's me. I had hair. I'm jealous. That's my son, daughter, and wife. We're headed to Knoxville to a football game. Look like, an upwardly mobile young doctor family, except if you look really close at that bulge in my right pocket, it's a bottle of pills. Look great on the outside, but truly, I'm this. I just look a little different. I got on maybe a little bit cleaner clothes, and I don't have the tick marks on my face. Same disease process. I stepped into a system that was designed to put me in front of this council today. Doctors have about a 78 to 95% success rate in substance use disorder, and it's because we step into a system of care that's designed to put us here. And so instead of an obituary, I wound up getting appointed to the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners. There I am with my colleagues who I love. And guys, that happened not because of me or anything special about me. It happened because of the system of care that I stepped into. And that's what we're talking about trying to build in the state of Tennessee. So, foundational concepts. Addiction's not a moral failure. I'll tell you this, I was in front of the legislature in West Virginia not long ago, and at the end of my talk, there was a guy in the middle who said, Dr. Lloyd, I disagree with you. I think addiction is a moral failure. And it never dawned on me until that moment to say this. And it dawned on me, I was like, what if he's right and I'm wrong? What if he's right and I'm wrong? And this is the light that came over the head. Does that make a difference? Does that make a difference in how we treat these folks? Because if it does, then we're giving ourselves a right to be mean to them because of our judgment of them. And I didn't learn any of that in my Sunday school class. And so I don't think it makes a difference if you believe this or not. It shouldn't change how we treat folks. Addiction's treatable, treatment works, and people recover. And I hate Marie's not in here, but this is my friend Rod Bragg. And Rod used to talk about this all the time. In his office, I don't know if you're still in it or not, Taryn, but it used to be right above his desk. I kept it there when I had that office. But I think about Rod every time I throw this up here because that's what he always talked about. And last but not least, addiction is complex and the solution is systemic. So if we look at a possible ecosystem, okay, and this is not all inclusive, guys. Don't get me wrong, but it's a good start. So here are our referral sources. The biggest one of these referral sources is actually this one, self-directed, either from a patient themselves, friend, family member. The last one is actually doctors, which I didn't even put on here, so we'll put treatment providers. Very few doctors refer people to treatment. They don't understand about addiction. They don't recognize it when they're seeing it. If they do, they don't know where to send it. And that's just a fact, okay? So these are our referral sources. here is kind of the treatment process. And so I'm going to use Lisa because that's the place I've been to most recently. This is what Lisa does. This is what they do. You don't just go into treatment and sit there and play tennis and you know, and look out the window at a mountain. That's not what you do. Right? It's all of these things. And if you look at it, a lot of these things are what our friends and family did for us growing up. I mean, this is peer support. It's life skills development, employment, case management, what to wear for a job interview. Lisa and them actually now, when somebody finishes their program and under certain circumstances, she gives them a car. Now, it's not a great car, but it's transportation, right? And so that's what the treatment part is about. And then you get over here, right, this is what our outcome is. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for a healthy, happy person that's going back out into the world, that has social support, housing, transportation, and employment, and go back to Kurt's slide. Go back to the needs assessment for Tennessee. These are the things that we're looking at. How would any of us do this morning if we came here to this meeting and we slept on the street last night? But we're not going to be where we are right now. And so these are the basic things that people need. This is Maslow. It's straight up Maslow. So if we look at our intervention points here, pre-treatment, this is the word harm reduction. I hate harm reduction because it's got such a bad name. But harm reduction matters, guys. We can't treat dead people. We can't treat dead people. So we look at access to naloxone. Naloxone is life-saving. But if we go out and we spend all of our money on naloxone and we just keep reversing people, what does that do to our stock in the middle of our system? Nothing. It doesn't do anything. Right, that's why you don't sink all of your resources in one place. You have to figure out what percentages need to be allocated here to try to bankrupt this system with stock in the middle. SST is syringe service programs. Okay, those things also get a bad rap. Those things drive down rates of hepatitis C and they drive down rates of HIV. You say, well, I'm not at risk for any of those. I live in this community, but it doesn't matter to me. Yeah, it does. The more circulating virus in your community increases your risk of getting it. I don't care if you belong in any of those things, because if you have a car wreck and you go to the hospital, there's still a risk you get it in a blood transfusion. And your risk of that blood transfusion is going to be dependent upon the viral load in your community. It affects all of us. You can't just sit there and say that it's somebody else. And then last but not least, VRLAC, voluntary reversible long-acting contraception. 99% of pregnancies in people who are using drugs are unintended. If you want to make an impact on downstream neonatal abstinence with syndrome or neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome, babies being born dependent, prevent unintended pregnancies, right? Not by force, but a lot of women that we deal with had no idea about forms of contraception and how they worked and whether or not they're reversible. And if down the road they got better and they wanted to have kids, could they? These are all things that are targets. With regards to treatment, increased access to MOUD. Guys, this is the base, right? MOUD, medications to treat opioid use disorder, is just a tool to help those people who are struggling with cravings so we can help them maintain in the treatment process. Support during pregnancy and postpartum. My friend Brooke, what she had in Tennessee, support that we were able to give her, and then when you took that support away, she gets put in jail, has somebody making medical decisions that don't have the authority nor the licensure to make those medical decisions, and she winds up dying. That's a preventable death, and that's what I'm talking about when it comes to system. And then expand services for neonatal opioid withdrawal syndrome. In the criminal justice system, improve treatment in jails and prisons. When you get out of jail or prison, no matter how long you've been in there, your risk of overdose and dying in that first 2 weeks is 40 times what an age-matched individual in your community is. So what about we start treating you before you get out of jail, and then we have a hot handoff to the community? We'll bend the needle really quick there. And then, funding handoff programs and recovery services. This also includes out of hospital emergency departments. You overdose, you get reversed, they take you into the hospital, you stay there 2 hours, and you hit the door. Yeah. Okay, what about trying to intervene in that setting right there and get that person from that hospital emergency room bed into a treatment program? That's what I'm talking about with hot handoff services. When you look at housing, I've used the National Association of Recovery Residencies. There's other people out there. Lisa's group did a good job of defining that. But whenever we're putting people in housing, we need to make sure that it's housing that's supportive of the recovery, and we're going to do the best job we can with that here in Tennessee. Enrich prevention strategies. Guys, we can start to prevent our way out of this. And I'm not talking about there, and I'm not disparaging there, but I'm talking about evidence-based prevention programs that can be implemented. Start allocating our dollars to some of these things. If you have a kid that does not use drugs before age 18 and winds up using drugs after age 18, right, there's a much less chance of them developing a substance use disorder if they've never used drugs before 18. That's a fact, right? So we need to be looking at really enriching our prevention strategies. Support data collection and continuous quality improvement. We've talked about this in this group a lot, but we have to have an idea of where we are at our baseline We have to have a mechanism to be able to measure our interventions and then make changes based on what we're seeing with our real data. And last, but certainly not least, is transparency and involvement of people with lived experience. Because it takes sick people to help sick people a lot of times. And we have to keep our minds open to that, and we have to look at, the state has a great training program for people, with a certified peer recovery specialist. I'm not sure what happened up there. Certified peer recovery specialist, so a way to go ahead and start to utilize these folks where they build relationships and we're able to hold them in the treatment process. Do you know what the best predictor of a good long-term outcome is in the treatment of opioid use disorders? Anybody know what it is? It's length of time in treatment. That's the only one. It's the only one that's shown any correlation at all. If you get to 1 year, your chance of getting to 15 years is about 8 to 10%. When you get to 5 years, I've already told you it's greater than 80%. It's about retaining people in treatment. That's the system that I'm talking about. It's not all inclusive, but it's a good start, and it's going to be the majority of what we see come before us. And then last but not least, my end picture is not an obit. This is my picture. This is my family. Those people have all been affected by addiction, and we came out on the other side. And we didn't come out on the other side because I'm smarter than anybody else. We didn't come out on the other side for any other reason other than the fact that I stepped into a system of care that's designed for me to be successful. And that's what the challenge of this group is. And I don't know who's next.
Clay Jackson, so if you could hand off the clicker to him. Give me 1 second.
Last time I was on a program with Steve and I had to follow him, I told him I was gonna quit. So I guess my word means nothing now. Don't take a break.
Can you advance it, Clay?
Not sure I can.
There, is that you? Are you advancing it? Yes, you are. Okay, keep going. There you are.
Okay. All right. I'm wearing two hats today. I'm Stephanie Vanterpool as well as Clay Jackson. I'll try not to do any harm. She's in BVI, contributing to her home nation today. Unintended consequences, pain, policy, pills, and palliation. My task was to talk about pain management and also to talk about palliation. Full disclosure, I'm not going to talk a lot about non-pharm with pain today. There are non-pharm options for a lot of chronic pain, but our purview is to deal with opioids, and so I'm basically going to focus on the pharmacology of pain. There's my affiliations. What might you get out of this? Can we know the difference between acute and chronic pain with respect to the biopsychosocial spiritual model? It's a very long word. I'm not qualified to even say it, much less know what it means. Suffice to say, it's not all biology that has to do with patients and how they respond. Psychology to it, what the patient wants out of life, what they have, and then the social determinants of health that Stephen made mention of, and then the spiritual component as well. What's the meaning in their life? What's the purpose in their life? What do they have as a driver that drives them to health or to illness? Let's explain how administrative categories of so-called cancer pain and chronic pain are administratively convenient, but they're not very clinically relevant. And I think I could show you that firewall doesn't make a lot of sense. But a lot of our state policy is based about dividing people into good pain patients and bad pain patients, and people who deserve opioids and people who don't. So I'm using air quotes mentally here, if you can understand that. Appreciate the ways in which response to the opioid epidemic has led to a lot of unintended consequences, both for chronic pain patients and for people who are in my realm of palliative care. And then I want to propose a model as well. Stephen put it, this blue sky model. I want to talk about a blue sky model for us as well in terms of a middle and margin strategy to improving public health vis-a-vis the role of opioids in society. So I realize that's a big goal. It's kind of a big honking out audacious goal of BHAG, but we do have that opportunity. This is a windfall we won't have next year. This is a one-time opportunity in our generation to make a difference. So we can talk about that. How do we get where we got? Most of you are familiar, if you read any Beth Macy's stuff or Quinones' stuff, Sam's stuff from New York Times. You know that, the CDC itself says there are 50 million people who have chronic pain, in America. What does that mean? You know, I'm at the side of life on the backstretch where, you know, I backstretch of the race course. I have fewer years ahead than I do behind. And that means when you're on the backstretch, you have to do back stretches to get up. So I do have some pain, but chronic pain, 50 million people, you know, what does that mean? We have about 20 million people who have significant chronic pain, meaning that it changes their functionality. I can give you a pain score every day, and it'll be 0, 1, 3, whatever, but functionality is affected by about 20 million Americans. It's less than 10%, but a significant amount. Pain's fifth vital sign, anybody heard that? It's a tremendous mistake that we made. In 1990, the president of the American Pain Society wrote a letter to the editor, Annals of Internal Medicine, three pages long, and he called for pain to be a fifth vital sign. JACO took it up in 2001. On the front page of that's Joint Commission, the people that certify hospitals like these around the country to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. And that on the front page, it was sponsored by Janssen Pharmaceuticals, which makes fentanyl patch. So you know that's kind of how we kind of got involved with different entities and all that. And you can read all about that. And then there was an arms race that Pfizer led in the 90s with their antidepressants, with their antibiotics, and a lot of pharmaceutical companies started doing a lot of consumer advertising. This is an old model. It was developed by somebody that you may have heard of, Arthur Sackler, in the 1950s, and that kind of came back around with promotion of oxycodone in a specific formulation called OxyContin, and that became a multi-billion-dollar drug in the 2000s as a result of pharmaceutical promotion. So in 2012, when I met Steve, we started working on this problem in Tennessee because this was the graph that we were dealing with. In 2010, these data showed that opioid sales were going up, opioid deaths were going up, and opioid treatment admissions were going up. And those graphs followed each other. That's when I met Tommy, and the governor had tasked and Wes and some of these other guys and ladies. We met, and our idea was if we could pull this curve down of opioid prescription in Tennessee, that the deaths would go down and the treatment admissions would go down. That makes sense, right? But your high school statistics coordinator will tell you that correlation is not causation. Everybody knows that. That's a high school problem. That's an elementary fact of statistics. And we knew that, but still there's an emotional pull from your limbic system that says, well, golly, it makes sense. We just need less drugs in the marketplace. And so we took it upon ourselves as a state board, CDC, DEA, FBI, TBI, lots of different entities said, how can we reduce prescription so that we'll have less of these problems? And if we take this one line down, then the other two lines that we don't want will go down. I just want you to remember this date, 2010, because we're gonna use that date again. So on the federal level, criminal prosecution of illicit prescribers via Controlled Substances Act. 32 Tennessee clinicians were rounded up in 2019 and charged. A lot of those are in federal prison right now, including a childhood friend of mine that I grew up with. That was limited by the other controversial Supreme Court decision in 2022. You may be familiar with Dobbs. Ruin versus United States took the teeth out of Controlled Substance Act for prosecutors to some degree. What Ruin showed is that if you're a prosecutor, you've got to show that the doctor, the MP, or the PA knew that they were trafficking, basically. That bad medical judgment is not, the Controlled Substance Act, you can't criminally prosecute somebody for bad medical judgment. Now, a board can deal with them for bad medical judgment, but you can't put them into federal prison unless you show that they had intent and they knew they weren't prescribing for a legitimate medical purpose. Okay, so it made it a lot harder to put people in federal prison. And there were reclassification of drugs. 2012, Lortab or hydrocodone got reclassified from class 3 to class 2. Critically important because you can't refill it and you can't call it in. There were lots of nurses and office staff that were calling in on prescriptions for family members, et cetera, doctors that were doing that. Can't do that when it's a class 2 instead of a class 3. So Lortab was reclassified. In the state, complaints-based regulatory intervention, state boards. That's complaint-based. So you got to wait till somebody messes up or somebody in the community makes a complaint about somebody before you take action. Formative regulatory oversight, the Pain Clinic Registration Act.
it's not called that, this legislature did in 2012, and then establishing prescription guidelines and also the database, which is created in 2006, but January 1st of 2013 is required that we all register for the CSMD or the database and registry, and then we had to look at it if we were prescribing an opioid by the pain guidelines. So these are all strategies that the state and the feds made. So let's get a handle around prescription opioids, so-called licit opioids, above-the-board opioids. Let's get a handle about what's happening so we don't have a Wild West and licit turns into illicit. That was the idea. And all these things have happened in the early 2010s. Remember that data 2010 that I showed you? Because we're going to look at some data. Okay, here's what happened with doctor shopping. This is the last 7 years. This is hot off the press 2022 report. Thank you, Wes, for pointing in the right direction. 2015 to 2022. This is amazing. 5,000 instances of potential doctor shopping. That's 5 prescribers or 5 pharmacies in 90 days. In the bad old days, I didn't know what was going on at Walgreens, CVS, or mom and pop somewhere, because I could, unless I knew the pharmacist and they called me and said, Mary Jo's here again, and she just got loose of Billy Sue, and she's filled over here and over there. I didn't know, but with the CSMD, now I know. And so we intentionally set that target at 5 pharmacies or 5 docs within 90 days. There were 5,000 instances of that in 2015. In 2022, 382. And I will tell you that I'm actually an advocate of removing the pharmacy shopping issue now, because there's so few pharmacies that carry opioids. My cancer patients are trotting around town looking for it, and they're filling 20 of their 100 prescriptions, number 100 prescriptions here. They're filling 40 over here with another prescription. They're filling 80 over here, 3 weeks later, because they can't get 120 Percocet 5s anymore at a lot of pharmacies. Because after CVS, Walmart, Walgreens paid into our opioid abatement settlement, they don't want any more opioid business. And so, one of my slides I'll show you later is, when you drain a swamp, you don't just get rid of boa constrictors, you hurt egrets too. So we've done some good work, but there's been some unintended consequences. But, hey, doctor shopping, I won't say it's a thing of the past, but I'll say it's retro. We don't have a lot of doctor shopping anymore, because this is a victory. This is an unqualified victory. There's no two ways about it. The lack of doctor shopping is awesome. What about pain clinics? We didn't want to be Florida, right? Who wants to be Florida, except in football? So, 2012, we had 284 pain clinics registered. We actually thought when we did the pain registry that all the illicit pain clinics would go out of business, because now it wasn't the Wild West anymore. You know what it became? For a few years, a safe harbor. We ran to 333 pain clinics. That's 3 per county. I mean, really? Some of our counties don't have 3 municipalities, but we had 3 pain clinics. We're now down to 114. I don't know what the right number is, but this is 1 per rural county, and then if you take the 5 most populous counties, you get 3 each, or 5 each. I think 114 is probably about right. It seems about right. But we have fewer pain clinics, but we have more oversight and regulation and control by the state about how those pain clinics are run. I think that's a good idea, because you can see if it's clean. You can see if the people are wearing uniforms and not prison uniforms. You can see if it looks like a medical clinic or if it looks like a club with a bouncer. And those kind of things make a difference in terms of pain management clinics. This is Public Chapter 1039. This is laughable. This is the Tennessee Medical Association's idea of how to dumb PC 1039 down so that doctors could understand it. And I still can't understand it. Public Chapter 1039 says you can't just write Percocet in perpetuity for dental extraction. And you can't just, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, write 180 pills for 11 months after that because you did a toe surgery. That's a good idea. But the way it was executed, okay, so over here, you've got a chart to start with before you figure out what's going on. Then once you figure out what's going on, if you're a surgeon, you have a separate chart. And then you can request this for a partial fill. And then you've got a 3-day with 180 MME. 75% of my colleagues, I made that number up, can't calculate an MME. They don't know what morphine equivalents are. And then you got a 10-day up to 500, and you got a 30-day up to 100. I tell you how every doctor I know handled public chapter 1039. You can write 3 days of opioids without doing anything, and that's what they do. And so on day 4, we had pain clinics in Knoxville, Chattanooga, et cetera. They had people rolling in with the cast from the orthopedist on day 4 saying, I need some more medicine, my orthopedist won't prescribe me more. So public chapter 1039 really took primary care and a lot of surgical subspecialties out of the prescribing business. You can argue that's great, you can argue that's terrible, or whatever. But public chapter 1039 was so complex that it really overwhelmed a lot of docs. So opioids are important, you know how to do this. I will tell you, I work in a cancer center. This is more complicated than most of our chemotherapy regimens. That's just how it works. So that was regulatory. Did it work? Did these things work? Here's what happened in Tennessee. 2015, we wrote about 8 billion MMEs that year, 7 years ago. We're about 3 billion now. So we've reduced by over 100%. This is exactly what we wanted to happen. When we met in 2012 as a Chronic Pain Guidelines Committee, we wanted year on year about 10 to 15% drop in prescriptions. Why did you want a 100% drop? We didn't want to drive an illicit drug market. If there were people that were addicted to prescription pills, we did not want to force them into heroin, which is what we knew about them. We didn't know about them. I didn't know about fentanyl then. Maybe some of Tommy's folks did. And I'm saying illicit carfentanil and all the Chinese analogs. We wanted a smooth reduction so people would not be forced into the illicit market. This is exactly what we asked for, but we didn't get what we wanted. That's the problem with intermediate outcomes. We got the prescription outcome we wanted. Remember that year, 2010? That's when opioids peaked in America. That's actually when they peaked in Tennessee in terms of prescriptions. But look at what happened with the curves of death. They didn't go down, they went up because what nobody saw coming, except the cartels and the Chinese manufacturers, was heroin making a rebound and illicit fentanyl analogs coming in. So because of those, and nobody saw a pandemic, and that's down the road here, we lost a lot of lives that we didn't anticipate losing. We scratched our heads and moaned and went to the water cooler and strategized over 1,000 deaths a year, and now we're running 3,000 a year in Tennessee. And so unintended consequences and unforeseen events have driven deaths up. And this is unintended consequences. You push one domino, you're standing in the line, the domino falls on you, and that's to some degree what has happened. Meanwhile, while we've focused on opioids, it's a little bit like whack-a-mole. Methamphetamine, nationally and in our state, has grown exponentially. So meth has made a huge, huge comeback. Okay, is it time for some new models? First of all, pain is a symptom, not a sign. I don't care if you put a number on it, that doesn't make it objective. Pain is an individual phenomenon. It's mediated by the brain, it's approximation. It is a guess at what's happening in the environment. It's not what's happening. And you can try to be objective and allopathic, and I need a diagnosis, and I want to know exactly what's causing that pain, and I want to know what the ICD-10 code is. You break it down, Newton, and you get as mechanistic as you want to get. You still will never remove the individual subjectivity of the experience of pain. It is a subjective phenomenon. You put all the metrics on it you want. It's not, it may be measurable, but it is not objective. It is always subjective. There is no algorithm. Chronic pain is not acute pain with Groundhog Day syndrome. Day 91 of pain is different than hour 91 of pain. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Buddhist or Islamic or a nun or an NUN or an NONE. I don't care what your spiritual orientation is. 91 days of pain, and we draw it arbitrary at 90 days. Chronic pain is a biopsychosocial spiritual phenomenon. I've taken some heat nationally for this. I had a rheumatoid arthritis patient challenge me and say, "Are you saying I have a spiritual problem?" I said, "No, ma'am. I'm saying you have a biologic issue that has a biologic substrate, but it's mediated through a psychospiritual matrix." She still didn't like me. All symptoms are a product of an inferential process. Your brain is an amazing computer that throws out most of the data and keeps what it wants to. You don't see reality. You don't experience reality. You see and experience an approximation of reality. And chronic pain The reason why it's so different for every other person with the same diagnosis is because their brains are picking different things out because they have a pattern of recognition that they developed over a lifetime. That's why your mom matters. Freud was right. It's her fault. Acute pain is mostly biological. If you're a priest or a painter or a plumber, and you've got a bone sticking out of your leg, you need Dilaudid till you stop screaming or your blood pressure goes down. I've worked ER enough to know. Acute pain is a biological phenomenon. But on day 91, if you develop a type 2 chronic regional pain syndrome from the nerve injury in your femoral nerve that came from that complex fracture, it does matter whether you're a priest or a plumber. It does matter what your benefit package is. It does matter whether you have a spouse and supportive family. It does matter if your life has meaning and purpose, whatever that meaning and purpose is. Because all this stuff matters as you move through the chronic pain process. Why is that important? Why am I showing this model? Because Dilaudid will fix this. I don't care who you are. I can give you enough Dilaudid to make you stop screaming if there's a bone sticking out of your leg. But if you're at day 91, I can throw Purdue Pharma at you and not stop your pain if you have the wrong mix in this milliliter. And if you're an 88-year-old bridge player in Britain, which is where I trained for hospice, I've seen those folks walk around with metastatic stage 4 cancer to bone on paracetamol, which is British Tylenol. Not everybody, but some of them, because this stuff matters in chronic pain. And when you try to dumb chronic pain down to a pharmacologic problem, you get stupid solutions. All right, two smartest guys I know, not named Stephen Lloyd or Stephen Vanderpool. Vlad Belichick and Chuck Raison. This is a complex arena of saying that genes matter, but genes have Miranda rights. They have a right to remain silent. And they get turned on and turned off by early life adversity. So ACEs matter. Kindergarten matter. Remember that book, Robert Fulgham, All I Knew to Know I Learned in Kindergarten? All I ever knew about pain I learned before kindergarten. Because my genes are turned on or turned off for inflammation before I ever get the 64 crayon box with the sharp. 3 years old, 4 years old. That's my twins who are 4 years old are finding out they're going to have chronic pain or not today, based on how my wife treats them and how I treat them. With a harsh environment or a nurturing environment. They either have nutrition or not. They're either abused or not. So their life at age 50 is being formed today. Because they got their genes from daddy and mama, but they're going to be turned on and turned off, the Miranda rights, by how we treat them. And all of that comes forward into systemic manifestations of disease or illness. So adverse childhood experiences contribute downstream risk for chronic pain, substance use disorder, and mental illness. This is the unholy trinity that we have faced on Thunder Road since before NASCAR, the Civil War times. The morphine addicts that we generated in 1865, not 1965, all struggle with these issues because of adverse childhood experiences. You make me king of the world tomorrow, we're investing all this money in ACEs, or a lot of it. Trying to take down ACEs. High levels of inflammation, epigenetic effects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can read the real papers, or I wrote a dumb paper on it that I can give you reference. If you have mental illness, you got a 2 times risk of chronic pain. If you got chronic pain, you double your risk of mental illness. These are dogs that travel together. They're wolves that hunt in packs. They make each other worse. They're not only comorbid, they're co-contributory. So all this stuff matters. Here's the bottom line on prescription opioids. I'm going to tell you everything. You put the truth here into me. This slide is what I believe about prescription opioids. The overwhelming majority of patients exposed to opioids, 98.7%, do not progress to long-term use within 18 months. Okay? I know everybody that hates Purdue and Janssen and all these, and Walgreens and Walmart, I know everybody makes fun of that letter to the editor in 1980 in New England Journal of Medicine that was 5 sentences long, and how the Purdue people came in their miniskirts and their slacks and told everybody that opioids didn't matter and you could use all the OxyContin you wanted, and to make fun of that 5-sentence letter. This is not a 5-sentence letter. This is a 10.7 million patient study. That's claims data, but this is an outpatient. This is not inpatient. This is long-term. And in 18 months, only 1.3% of them were still using opioids. Go up out to 5 years, and you get, 9 years, you get out to about 5% if you track them for 9 years. And so The vast majority of people that sniff a Percocet will not sell their soul for it. They take it and they move on. The majority, vast majority. But there is a sizable minority of chronic pain patients. If they use the opioids long enough, or the dose is high enough, think area under the curve, it's about 8% that wind up in addiction. Okay? Think area under the curve, exposure. It's like TB. You don't get it by looking at somebody with TB. You get it by prolonged exposure and a great exposure. It's area under the curve. And that's what happens. Now, I know some people don't like the addictive personality construct, but this number consistently shows up, 8 to 15%. It didn't show up in literature around the world, no matter what your society is. Non-med use of prescription opioids may use of heroin, but not often. MMWR data about 4% in 5 years will turn to heroin from prescription opioids. But those conditions are different now. These are pre-pandemic numbers. Long-term oral opioids are not intractable, infallible. Some people will tell you that long-term opioids don't work for chronic pain. That's wrong. They do for some people. It's about a 40% reduction in pain, subjective scores. What long-term opioids do not do is they don't improve functionality. So they will not give you your life back. They will make the pain a little bit better. But about a third of people who are on long-term opioids stop because they can't move, or they can't think, or their blood pressure's too low, or they just don't like the way they feel. So not everybody exposes. Look, far more people discontinue opioids because they don't like it than get addicted to it because they love it. Opiates are rarely the drug of first choice. So that's the truth about opioids as I know it. All right, what do you take home from this? Subjectivity has not become objectivity because you found a metric. A subjective phenomenon is just that. I don't care if you number it or not. I don't care what your pain score is. I do care what your pain score is, but I don't care what your pain score is. Complex problems do not admit to simple solutions. We'll fix it this way. That's a road to hell. You'll discover something by doing something. You got to fix complex problems with simple solutions. The law of unintended consequences is a tough customer. I want to say tough customer because it's a public meeting. I'm being recorded. There's another way to say this. Overprescribing facilitated the crisis but did not cause it. Therefore, right-sizing or undersizing prescribing will not solve it. Moonshine was here before Purdue Pharma ever pushed a pen in the doctor's office. So we have so-called deaths of despair. If you want to read Case's book and Angus's book, biology is a great place to start and it's a poor place to finish. We're not going to get a biologic solution to this problem. And patients should precede protocols, but not principles. And that's all this regulation that we have. You've got to see the patient instead of the protocol. But I don't care who the patient is. The principles of good medical practice have to come to bear. If it's the mayor's wife and she's saying, I need 147 Percocets for my big toenail, hangnail problem, you need to really rethink what you're doing because there's a principle involved, not just the patient. All right, a little bit of palliative medicine. This is Cicely Saunders. She's a founder of the hospice movement. The first hospice in the Western world was founded in southwest London in Sydenham by Cicely Saunders in 1967. Cicely Saunders was my teacher. I rounded with her before she died. She was in her 90s when I trained with her. This is her hospice, St. Christopher's Hospice, the very first one. And this is Robert Twicross, who was her protege. He wrote the book on palliative medicine, the Oxford textbook of palliative medicine. It's that thick, makes a great doorstop. The reason why he's on here is because she asked him to make this, which is a medicine because in 1967 to about 1987, your mother had metastatic cancer. You had to wake her up on the hour, every hour, to give her morphine at night because they had nothing long-acting. So unless they're on a pump, which is hard to do unless you're in a building like this, if you're at home, you got to wake mom up to keep dosing her with meds. And so people were screaming while they were dying. And she said, Robert, will you get Mortimer Sackler to make a long-term agent that will help our cancer patients? And Mortimer Sackler said, I'll be happy to do that. We'll take morphine and make it a continuous pill. And they called it MS-Contin. And when the patent ran out on that, the Sackler family, which ran Purdue Pharma, made OxyContin. So for every one of you that thinks there's a good category of people and a bad category of people, and there's righteous pharmacology and unrighteous pharmacology, I just want to remind you that the person who founded the movement to make dying better in the Western world is the person indirectly responsible for the OxyContin deluge that we got in the early 2000s. That was my teacher. I'll just drop the mic and walk away. I can't do that. What's palliative care? It's a management of symptoms, chiefly in patients with advanced disease and whose medical recovery is not expected. Comes from the Latin word pallus or cloak. I grew up in West Tennessee. I didn't know this. If you were Latin and your teacher gave you more opportunity than mine, forgive me. But a pallbearer is not somebody who's carrying around a guy named Paul. It comes from this, the cloak of the body. This is Cartesian duality, that the body is the cloak of the spirit. And that's what palliative care does. We cloak the body. We take care of the body and the spirit. This is my illustration for this. This guy's in a hurricane, and you can't change the weather. I can't change metastatic cancer. If your immunotherapy doesn't work, I can't do anything for you. But I can change the way you experience your disease because I can take care of your symptoms involved in it. Don't ask me how his hat is still on. It may be a post-it. Palliative care is people with advanced illness. Two things. If the symptoms are tough, you need me. If the decisions are tough, you need me. If your therapy's working, cancer's shrinking, you don't need me. If you're not hurting, you're not throwing up, you can poop, you can pee, and you don't have to get up all night, you can sleep. You don't need a palliative care physician. With tough symptoms and tough decisions, you need palliative care. Okay. Cancer patients hurt, 80% of them. Cancer patients use a lot of opioids. Recent cancer, over half use opioids. But they typically don't misuse. So the rate of misuse is about 8%. Where we've seen that magic number before. I told you it shows in literature everywhere. Opioid exposure does not drive opioid abuse in 90% of patients. Cancer patients who use a lot of opioids, they actually don't misuse. That's what you think. Cancer patients actually use less opioids than some of the other chronic diseases in palliative care, such as cirrhosis, COPD, and chronic kidney disease. What are the drivers of abuse in cancer patients? Young age, alcohol use, and abusing something else. So it's not the amount of opioids that my patients are on that determine whether they abuse or not. It's the patient that I'm giving them to. That's the corollary of the old Purdue phenomenon. It's not the drug, it's the addict. And everybody bangs on them for that. And they abuse that as a concept. But I'm telling you, the data show you that it's not just the opioid exposure. Yes, higher doses do drive it. You know what the odds ratio is? If you're abusing cocaine, you have a 15 times risk of abusing opioids, if I give it to you. If I give you more opioids rather than less, you know how much that drives it up? 0.03%. This number is 1.003 for having a high dose versus low dose. So yes, the amount of opioids matter, but the type of patient matters a lot as well, and what their background experience is. This line between chronic pain and acute pain sort of falls apart in cancer because the oncologists have got too good. When I started 27 years ago, people died pretty quickly from metastatic lung cancer. Now, with oral chemotherapy and immunotherapy, we've turned breast cancer and prostate into chronic diseases. And we're well on the way with lung and pancreas if you got the right genetic modifications. And we're discovering drugs every quarter. And so chronic pain is a lot more prevalent in my practice than it used to be. Most of my patients, and I work in a cancer center, most of my patients will be with me for months, years, decades, not weeks, months. And so chronic pain is more of an issue for me than you would think based on where I work. So 4-year period, 26% less opioids. 4-year period in oncology, 20% less opioids. These are not statistically different. What I'm showing you is every regulation that we had to reduce opioid prescriptions in the general population got a hold of oncology too. They were not smart regulations, they were not targeted regulations, and we didn't have a smart response and a targeted response. Oncology got scared, just like your local nurse practitioner, and they stopped prescribing opioids in the amounts.
I could show you, and the formatting has gone wank here, but I can show you several studies that will show you how consultants became reluctant to escalate dosing in the inpatient setting of severely ill cancer patients. These are patients that had metastatic cancer, and they were not giving them increased opioids in the hospital because the regulatory environment had changed. Different study, 2018 over 2008. It's the same study, and I apologize here. Those who are treating cancer, reduced opioid, they reduce the opioids the same as the general population prescribers reduced opioids. Here's people, you really want to say that you won the bad luck lottery. You got cancer, but you've also got a diagnosis of opioid use disorder. And you go in the hospital, I hope your buddy brought a leather belt because you're going to bite on it. You bet. Because you're not getting medicines. There was a lady, she had opioid use disorder. She was on TPN. That means she can't eat or swallow anything. She's on IV only nutrition. They denied her IV opioids. How else could she get it? They denied her IV opioids for drug-seeking behavior. You know what her drug-seeking behavior was? I'm hurting. Could I have some pain medicine, please? She can't swallow this. Can't swallow liquid. Died 7 days later. What was she going to do? Was she going to go up and down the hall and interrupt somebody's bingo game and give them some drugs? I'm just telling you that there are some unintended consequences that we run into in our good intentions of lowering the opioids in the environment. It has lowered the opioids for everybody. It's unintended consequences. Here are patients that are going to hospital. This is a hospice. This is a big hospital in Oregon, 550 beds. About a 25% reduction in opioids given as they were discharged to hospice. To hospice. Look at the average lifespan of a hospice patient in the United States, 11 days. So Granny goes out the door, God forbid she gets some hydrocodone. Now, a lot of patients did get opioids, but less opioids. So I believe in interdiction, I believe in prescription controls, I believe in regulation, I believe in all this stuff. I participated in a lot of those things, not interdiction because I'm not smart enough, tough enough. But I participate in a lot of things, but they do have unintended consequences. You don't just get rid of boa constrictors, you get rid of egrets. Patients who are in survivorship have difficulty getting the treatment they need. Here's Monique. She's not real. She's an amalgamation of black female patients that I see every day in Memphis. First of all, she's got metastatic breast cancer. Because when you're black, you don't get mammograms in the same way as white people do. It's fact. You can call me racist or you can call me whatever. I'm just talking to you about public health epidemiology. Just happened. Social determinants of health, what have you. Limited supply on hand at the pharmacies. Doctor writes 120. We've got 60, Monique. You can get it, take it or leave it. Got 60. We don't have them today, but we'll get them next Wednesday. If you live in Collierville, it's an affluent suburb in my community. That's an inconvenience. If you live in Orange Mounds, it's a non-affluent suburb in my community. It's an insuperable barrier. Because that prescription can't be transferred to the other Walgreens that has it. The VA won't allow us to do that. Pharmacists won't reveal supplies. She calls me and says, pharmacy doesn't have it. I don't have a nurse to sit around and call 18 pharmacies to find her Percocet. But if she calls, they won't tell her. Why? Because Monique's nephew, Mo, may come and knock off the pharmacy. If the pharmacy says, we got plenty of Percocet, come on by. Why would Walgreens want to re-rob? Unintended consequences. Social determinants of health. Monique has one car that's on two legs. And Mo needs to get a shot at Walmart. They laughed the last time he pulled out an FMLA paper. So how can he get his auntie to the drugstore? Frequent prejudicial treatment. Monique has committed the crime of having claimed by being black. And if you don't think that black people get treated differently with opioids and pain, I have many papers to show you that they do. And I have many individual stories. About 2 to 3 times a month, I have a Monique that goes into withdrawal because they cannot get their pain medicine. Stage 4, metastatic cancer, can't get basic pain medicine. And so I'm just here saying there are unintended consequences. We need to do great work to help people who are addicted. We need to do great work to help people that are in trouble. But we also need to do great work to help people
who continue to struggle with some of the consequences of the very things that we put into place to try to make things better. And I'm one of those people. Monique, in a wonderful ironic twist, 11 years after I began work with the Chronic Pain Commission, Monique is enduring some of the consequences that I put into motion. So we just have to own that. Okay, here's my blue sky, and I'll quit. Here's the middle. This is what we're already doing. We're trying to adjust illicit opioid use through professional education and professional regulation to be appropriate opioid use and not inappropriate use. We're already doing this. Did it for 10 years. Chronic use, 1 to 5%, I showed you that, and addiction, 8%. If we do this right, some of these numbers will go down. They will, some of them. We want to prevent illicit use. Is that 4% of these people? Do they get here by different pathways? I can't tell you that. But we do have interdiction and legal deterrence for that. If people move to substance abuse, we have treatment. We have medical assisted treatment. We have sober housing, vocational rehab. We have peer support. Everything that was on your ecology up here. That's the middle. That's what we're doing. We could spend all our money to improve this because all of it needs improvement. With due respect to all of us who are trying to do this work in the middle, we could do so much more. We could do better at this. And we put all our money here. But I will submit to you that if we spend all our money to do this, 18 years later, we're going to have some of the same results. Because doing this better gets us some incremental change. But I would say the low-hanging fruit, these are proactive and reactive, they're intermediate changes, and ROI is pretty simple to measure. Harm reduction, this is where the low-hanging fruit is. Legal exchange, you called it something service. It sounded a lot better than legal exchange. Legal exchange sounds like it's made up by a red state governor. Sorry. And reversal agents, such as naloxone or otherwise. That's reactive, it's short-term changes. ROI is very simple measure. How many lives you saved? We could put money here. We're not doing as much of this as we could, and this is low-hanging fruit. But the real ask is on this margin, and that's primary prevention. I've already told you. I'll tell you, I'm one of 15 votes. But if somebody brings a proposal and it has early life intervention in it, tied to, if they can take whatever that girl's mother was and deal with her daughter, I'm in. I'll vote with 2 hands and try to get you to count me twice. Because I think if we can do early life intervention and stop ACEs, if we can do some public education, if we have to pull out Nancy Reagan's hologram and say, just say no, because it's one and done now. There's no good marijuana anymore. A kid can take 1 pill and they're done. And so abstinence is, there's harm reduction, but abstinence education may make sense in today's environment. That's proactive, it's long-term changes, but it's difficult to measure the ROI. So I realize it's a big ask, but just think about what Steve presented. Think about this as some of the things we can do. I asked some of my experts what I'm missing, and I'm sure I'm missing a lot on this form, but the middle and the margins, I think, is a decent way to think about it. This is the oldest tree in Tennessee. It's in Nashville. It's 343 years old. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time is today. So I can't stop ACEs from 20 years ago. We spend a lot of money on ACEs, we're going to look stupid for 18 years. And then we're all going to be geniuses when we retire. Because if we spend money, if we plant trees to stop ACEs, it'll take a generation, but it will make a profound effect. Thanks. I'll surrender the talking stick.
Thanks, Clay.
I don't think this is.
What's that? What did he say?
Are you kidding me? He said the crazy thing was following you, and then you're turning, and then you want me to follow both of you guys with a law enforcement issue? I mean, Mary, I would defer to you in terms of your time, what you guys got.
All right, yeah, so we've got 3 that, I mean, we can do those next time if you're okay with that.
Sorry, I filibustered you, Tommy.
Well, you also took over Stephanie's part as well, so it's fine. We've got law enforcement and diversion, which, we already talked about unintended consequences there, and it's really important. Tommy's really good too, by the way. So don't let him undersell himself.
Very good.
And then Karen and Lisa, if y'all are okay with doing it next time, is that okay? I think we've got a lot to chew on. I mean,
what Clay did is as good as anything you'll ever see. I promise you that. And, it's a lot for us to think about, so I don't have any problem with letting that marinate and then coming back at our next meeting and, you know, having Tommy and Karen and Lisa finish up. But you've got an overall idea about a system. You've got a really good idea about how there were unintended consequences with people that we all care about, you know, end-of-life patients, patients with chronic pain, and some of the stuff that Clay said is not popular. They don't want to hear that there's you know, a spiritual component to anything, but there actually is. And so I think it's a lot for us to absorb, and I'm good with that. And to keep us on time, it's 2:45 right now. We've got a section here for public comment, and I know we had folks sign in. I don't know if we have any folks comment, but if we do, we're open to it. Kyle?
May I sit there?
You can sit anywhere there's a chair as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you very much. My name is Kyle Duval, and good afternoon. This has been so enlightening today. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Welcome Home Ministries, where we provide recovery housing in an environment that fosters hope, healing, and recovery for men with a substance use disorder. Additionally, I serve on the National Alliance for Recovery Residences Advocacy Committee, know them as NAR, and I am the Advocacy Chairman for the Tennessee Alliance of Recovery Residences. Now, that being said, I want this council to know that I'm not paid by NAR or TNR to appear before you today. Rather, I traveled here today from Nashville to give voice to the many faces and voices that seek refuge, support, and long-term recovery and certified recovery residences that TNR affiliates provide for individuals suffering from a substance use disorder and or co-occurring mental health conditions. If I may have 8 to 10 minutes of your time this afternoon, then I will keep this brief and stay close to the text I have prepared for this council on behalf of the Tennessee Alliance of Recovery Residents. TNR advocates for high-quality recovery housing for individuals that seek recovery in safe, healthy, family-like, substance-free living environments that support individuals in recovery from addiction, which is part of SAMHSA's official definition of recovery housing. It's found in Recovery Housing Best Practices and Suggested Guidelines. TNR strongly advocates for the state of Tennessee to enact high-quality recovery housing certification legislation, which is in keeping with the Excellence in Recovery Housing Act of 2023 passed by the United States Congress. Section 1231 of the Act provides the directive for high-quality recovery housing as it states the following, quote, clarifying the role of SAMHSA in promoting the availability of high-quality recovery housing, which is delineated throughout the Act. I will not do that this afternoon. TNR will continue to assist recovery housing operators in the process of certification until they are able to meet NAR standards and ethics and provide physical environments that are safe, healthy, family-like, substance-free living environments that support individuals in recovery from addiction. The National Council for Mental Well-Being published Building Recovery State Policy Guide for Supporting Recovery Housing in 2019. The National Council recommends the following to promote high-quality recovery housing throughout the United States. Quote, in addition to a clear definition of what constitutes recovery housing, policies and legislation should require that recovery housing meets national quality standards. The National Council recommends that legislation require that recovery homes meet quality standards established in 2011 by NAR and or the Oxford House model. As long-tested standards, they provide a clear and measurable baseline for residences and also reduce the administrative effort needed to create standards on the state or local level. Again, Building Recovery State Policy Guide for Supporting Recovery Housing. The National Council further states, and I quote, NAR affiliates are trained to ensure that local NAR recovery homes adhere to these standards and can be an invaluable resource for states to ensure that recovery housing operators are meeting these requirements. This This can significantly reduce the oversight and administrative burden for states and their local governments and is consistent with how states approach quality assurance for other types of supportive housing, end of quote. 10R, the Tennessee Alliance of Recovery Residences, is the authorized NAR Recovery Residence Certification affiliate in Tennessee. 10R has a tremendous wealth of experience and expertise in providing insight in establishing high-quality recovery residences with adherence to national standards and person-centered ethics, as well as training and technical assistance. As of June 1, 2023, 10R had 33 certified recovery housing affiliates with 12 additional recovery housing operators in process of certification for a total of 45 recovery residence operators. 10R affiliates have a total of 116 certified recovery residences and over 1,100 recovery housing beds in 15 cities and towns in Tennessee, the most recovery housing beds in the state. During the past decade, numerous states have enacted recovery housing certification legislation to support high-quality recovery residences that adhere to evidence-based best practices through a voluntary certification process. The Building Recovery State Policy Guide for Supporting Recovery Housing document has examples of model laws. I will share with you 3 examples. Ohio. Ohio has one of the highest rates of drug overdose deaths in the country. In response, Ohio pursued robust funding strategies that prioritize recovery housing. In fiscal year 2018 and 19, Ohio dedicated $3.5 million in state general revenue funding for recovery housing, general revenue, and $20 million in capital funds for recovery housing. This funding will support new homes, residents in recovery, and the state NAR affiliate to provide training and technical assistance to ensure that local recovery housing meets national quality standards. Florida. Florida created a voluntary recovery residence certification program based on NAR standards. Licensed treatment providers are required to refer certified recovery residences. And number 3, Rhode Island. Certification of recovery housing, here again, must adhere to using National Alliance for Recovery Residence standards. All referrals from state agencies or state-funded facilities shall be to certified houses, and only certified recovery housing facilities shall be eligible to receive state funding to deliver recovery housing services. Other states, examples of successful implementation of full support for the NAR standards and ethics: Indiana, Missouri, Virginia, Washington, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Maine, New Hampshire, and our neighbor, Kentucky. Additionally, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, ASAM, will contain a chapter regarding recovery support services, including a delineation of recovery residences written by NAR experts. The ASAM 4th edition is historic in that the criteria incorporates a continuum of residential treatment and recovery residence support, which include the NAR national standards and recovery housing 4 levels of support. In the absence of strong recovery housing certification and legislation in Tennessee, 10R is leading the way in recovery housing certification as the official NAR affiliate. All 10R affiliates abide by the nationally recognized NAR standards, ethics, and participate in on-site assessments of the physical living environment as a requirement to receive and or maintain 10R certification. 10R recovery housing certification ascertains that all certified recovery housing operators are in compliance with high-quality recovery housing national standards and person-centered ethics. Finally, if appropriate, 10R is willing to be an available resource for this council and the council's appropriate subcommittees. Certainly, the leadership and or legal counsel for the National Alliance for Recovery Residences can be of service to you with technical assistance, national standards in recovery housing, and model laws on behalf of individuals whose pathway in recovery leads them through recovery residences in the state of Tennessee. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kyle. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Miss Addie. I'm a street mom. We work for Next Step Initiative, and I think I'm not a speaker, by the way.
You're fine.
But, I just want to talk a little bit about, just a couple of sentences about, something that I don't hear a lot is getting to the people while they're in active use, building them up so that they will love themselves enough to go out and do what they need to do for themselves, whatever that is. We just kind of follow that, even if it's not what we think is right. We do what they need to do, what they think they need for themselves. Of course, we totally believe in that drug. I mean, because it's not even, I used to think it was just a Band-Aid, but for some it's a lifestyle. They have to do that forever. I guess basically what I'm saying is, before they get to the brick and mortar, before they get to that place where they're ready to help themselves, we need more people on the ground, in the streets, and in the camps, teaching them to love themselves enough so that they will want to do that. We have people, stop me if I go too long. We have people that have said to us, when I stop using, we're like, why are you going to wait till you stop using? So we started bringing them in to volunteer. When they volunteer, it depends on what level they're at. If they're able, we get them certified in Hep C and Hep C testing, HIV testing, CPRS if they've been clean long enough, or I hate the word clean, I'm sorry, if they're good for that. And then we send them out and they're marketable. One of them works for you, Dr. Lloyd, her name is Sarah. I mean, that's what we do. They work for Cornerstone now. We get them developed to where we can't afford them anymore, and we send them out to the world.
That's
and
good.
We've got Susanna's house, and I could go on and on and on with the list of places they went to. And I'm not trying to brag on me. This isn't about me. It's about these people. And if you love them, love them, love them. Okay, how long, Joey? We loved Joey for 5 years. Before he started doing methadone.
Mm-hmm.
He's 7 months clean from everything but methadone. It took 5 years of building up. So what I want to say is, let's not forget about the forgotten people that won't come out there. We need to reach in and get them and bring them there. Yes. We hold their hands, we transport them, we make them marketable for other places, we play music.
We're their friends.
My small music story is that we went to the Joy of Music. I had a lot of people coming to me saying, I sold my guitar. Well, they sold their soul, because part of that playing music is that it's a big piece of them, it's a part of them, it's their talent. It makes them feel good about themselves. So we went over to the Joy of Music and explained that to them. So they gave us guitars. Now they sit in the backyard. They can't sell the guitar. They have to give it back to me before the end of the day. This way they're in touch with their soul every time they come there. We also have and to make it feel like it's their place, they're homeless. All of our people are homeless. Most of our people are homeless. To make it give them a belonging, we have a wooden fence we built. They paint the fence. That's their wallpaper. This is your place when we're open. That's their wallpaper. All the rocks they did. They go all over. We have a garden. They plant their own flowers. They grow their own food. What else? But anyway, it's pretty much what I'm just saying is, let's not forget the forgettable people. People, the harder they are to approach, that's the ones we're after. That's the ones we're approaching. I just don't want to forget about the little guy. To us, that's true harm reduction.
Thanks, Ms. Addie. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Can I speak, please?
Yes, the chair recognizes, the infamous Richard Barber.
I've been to every one of these, and I don't think in the public comments, anybody has said thank you.
No, thank you.
And I want to say that on behalf of the people that we serve. I know it takes time, it takes away from your businesses. Everybody's got a lot to do. And on behalf of the people that we all serve, I just want to say thank you for your encouragement, for your energy, and for your willingness, and we appreciate it. We just appreciate it. Thanks, Richard.
We have two virtual.
Okay. The two virtual comments.
Do you have those unmuted? There we go. Good one, maybe.
Hi, I'm not sure if I'm being called on or not. I'm calling in. My name is Peter Hostler. I apologize if I'm interrupting and not being called on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I also want to echo my thanks. I wish I could have stayed for the entire thing. I was there and I've been listening in, and it's really heartening to hear the expertise. I just wanted to briefly make 3 points. I'm a project director for a rural community opioid response program grant right now in West Tennessee. And just 3 things, 2 of which I don't feel like I've heard mentioned. One is expanding MAT and MOUD is partly going to be a workforce training thing. We've been working really hard to expand access in West Tennessee, and there's a lot of folks, I know it's a complicated topic, but there's a lot of providers who just aren't interested in providing it. Yeah. And so I hope that the council has an opportunity to think about how sort of the next generation of providers, as we build that, how we might think creatively about ensuring that some of these regions have a little bit more, it's part of what solves the transportation problem is a sort of greater geographical spread of access points. Secondly, as part of this grant, one of the things that's been most successful is our employment of certified peer recovery specialists. And I appreciate the state's work on expanding that pipeline. I'm deeply concerned about the payment mechanisms for that pipeline. I feel like we're getting a lot of great folks in the community, but it's not always clear to me, who's going to pick up the tab on some of that work. I'm trying to make the case to healthcare systems and treatment providers. But if, I think part of what's going to have to be addressed is how do we compensate that really critical work. And then lastly, just wanted to make a pitch. There's almost no harm reduction at all in rural West Tennessee. And I think that's, as we think about HIV and Hep C, it's part of the, I hope it continues to be thought of as part of the ecosystem of recovery, because it's also one of the best and most important points to engage folks and kind of move them out of that space. But thanks so much. I learned a lot and really appreciate everybody's expertise.
All right, thank you. We have one other online public comment.
He has to unmute himself. No,
Maybe it's me.
Oh, that's him. Okay. There we go.
Michael from Hunger First in Kingsport. Hey, I was wondering if you guys have ever had to appeal a harm reduction plan that was shot down by the local authorities in the city. If there's any way to appeal it and or go to the Board of Tennessee to see about getting that started again, or how to go about that.
So I think I understand what you're asking. You're asking, is there any way to appeal the removal of a harm reduction program that was in place in East Tennessee? Is that your question?
Well, situation was I was working with ETSU here in getting a harm reduction plan for about a little over a year. The state approved it, and then when they brought it to Kingsport here in the city, they thumbs down and denied it and wouldn't let it happen. We'd already had the place set up and availability for the mobile unit to meet the people, and then the locals in the city just said absolutely not. So is there any way to get that appealed, or is there any way to
Well, that's a little bit outside the scope of this council, but I don't want to
My
turn you away.
apologies.
No, if you'll go to our website and there's a place to send in questions. It's under contact us. Go ahead and spell out that scenario and send it in, and we will see if we can at least point you in the right direction.
Okay, and lastly, and I'll hush, Dr. Lloyd, you're amazing. I just want to say thank you for all your efforts and everything, all of you do. Really do.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll send you a check. But no, thank you so much for that. And if you'll put that on our site, I can't guarantee you anything at all, but we can, hopefully at least give you somebody to talk to who that would fall under, because it's outside the scope of where we are. And thanks for tuning in as well.
Thank you.
We don't have any other virtual comments. Anybody else in the physical location here have a comment? We're 5 minutes over. Our next council meeting, as per our guidelines, will be in Chattanooga, and I'm assuming we will follow the same procedure that we followed for the one so far. Lisa, thank you for your group, and Karen for what you all did, and appreciate the extra work, and appreciate you all driving here today. And so, in AA terms, does anybody have a burning desire? If not, this meeting will stand adjourned. Thank you all.